Good evening and welcome to the Select Board meeting for January 29th, 2024. I am the Chair of the Board, Eric Eldridge. The following meeting is being recorded and broadcast by Tyngsborough Media. The meeting is available through our local cable access channels on Comcast and Verizon Fios and is a live stream on our website, www.tyngsboroughma.gov. A recording of this meeting will be available through our video on demand portion of our website. Open meeting laws require that any member of the audience who intends on recording either video or audio so declare that now. Seeing none, after instruction from the State Fire Marshal and the Tyngsborough Fire Chief, who happens to be here, in the event of an emergency, there is an exit directly across from me at the rear of the room and one to my left. With that, can I ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'm going to start with board introductions to my far left.
Ooh, that's me.
Yes.
David Andrus, Finance Director.
Jacqueline Schnackers, Executive Assistant.
Ron Schneider.
Good evening, Ron Cohen.
Good evening, Katerina Kelabokis.
Good evening, Colin Loisel, Town Manager.
Good evening, Kat Foster, Assistant Town Manager.
Okay, agenda-wise, we've got quite a packed agenda here. We're going to take things a little bit out of order. We're going to move the town manager report down past 7A. So with that, why don't we start with meeting minutes?
Can I group them, or do you want me to take them separately?
I think everyone was here, so I would take them in grouped.
I move that the Select Board approve the regular session meeting minutes for January 8th, 2024 and January 18, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries 4-0-0.
I move that the Select Board approve but not release the executive session minute meetings for January 8th, 2024 and January 18th, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries 4-0-0. Citizen and business time. None, so we can get going. So let's start with the presentation by the Tyngsborough Fire Department Community Emergency Response Team. Chief.
Thank you.
Good evening. Welcome.
I'm here tonight with firefighter Andrew Taylor, and I'm actually putting my emergency management director hat on, and this venture is going to be under the Office of Emergency Management. But we're looking to start a community emergency response team. Andrew applied for and received a grant from MEMA to go ahead and get that team started. It was $5,000 we got for a kickoff. And we've been in meetings with Colin about the process as we started. We've already, as you're aware, had a informational meeting last week, and we have another one coming up this Wednesday evening for people that may be interested in volunteering. And I think I'll let Andrew give you a brief overview as to what the team is all about.
So the CERT team is made up of citizen volunteers who come in and supplement emergency services during any emergency event that could potentially happen, power outages. We're looking at training them to help run shelters, to also look at possibly having them run a rehab center for firefighters during fires, and we're looking at doing seeing where we can fit them into doing things like the block party, maybe the festival of trees, using them as an addition to some of the other emergency services who do work those events.
So the idea is to, one, get some residents involved and help them become better prepared citizens more resilient during times of crisis, and also to form them as a team to assist the town and help their fellow neighbors when there's something going on. So we're excited about it.
Excellent.
Questions?
Any other information session coming up?
Yes, we have one Wednesday night, the 31st, at the Old Town Hall at 10 Kendall Road, and from 6 to, we went to about 7 o'clock last Wednesday, but I got it open till 8, so.
And I'd like to just add that it's not necessarily, just to sign you up. If you're just curious, come and ask questions, and you'll, no pressure, you'll leave there with an application, and you can get it to us when you're ready.
Are you looking for people with any specific skills or
Not any specific skills. It's a benefit to have somebody with skills.
Sure.
Because there's so many varied jobs that we're looking at potentially having as part of the CERT team. So skills are great, and being able to concentrate on something is great, but just really a willingness to come and learn. We've got a training, about a 20-hour training modules that we want to go through. Part of it's first aid, part of it's CPR. And there's a multitude of other things that come along with it. And as long as you're willing to learn and willing to volunteer some time and give back to your community, you're more than welcome to come.
do you get a good vibe from the first meeting?
A great vibe. I'm
Excellent.
very excited about it.
Great.
I've already actually had 4 people submit applications, so.
And I think to that question as well, we're certainly gonna take advantage of people's skills that they bring to it, but we think we'll have a role for just about anybody that wants. You don't have to have any training or skills to just be part of the team. And while, we're looking for adults at this point, 18 and over, some of the things that, he mentioned shelter operations. Under emergency management, we may have to have a point of distribution, whether it's for vaccines or pharmaceuticals, or it could be for, if we had to distribute bottled water or something. There's a role for everybody in something like that, whether you can pick things up and put them down, or you can manage some documentation, we'll find a role for you.
Do you have a target number of people that you're looking for?
Honestly, the 4 or 5 was where I wanted to start, but I'd be willing to accept as many people want to volunteer. I mean, the bigger the group, the more we can do, and the more the town they can give back to the town, and they can help the Office of Emergency Management do the things that need to be done.
Terrific. Yep.
For the purposes of training, it'd be nice to have, 6 or 10 people at least. Certainly, 10 to 20 would be fantastic. And the way we're looking at it is, when we start doing this training in a few months, we're gonna have 100 times better CERT team than we had yesterday.
Right.
So we'll walk before we run, and we'll take, who comes to help us.
Awesome.
Besides the 31st, is there anywhere else that somebody can read up on it? Is it maybe online anywhere on your website? Can they maybe call the firehouse? How does that work?
We've posted it on Facebook, through the town, through the fire department, and several other places. I've got quite a few posters up around town. The library's got some of the flyers. But calling the fire station, I'm usually there Monday through Friday. Just ask for me, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions or help them out with some information.
And it's on all the social media
Yeah.
as well.
And I
But
think-
Andrew's a point of contact, his email address is well posted.
Perfect.
Other questions?
So, Mr. Chair, so
Please.
I was actually at the first session. I was glad to come there. This is something that, I am going to sign up for, would love to do. When it comes to this town, whenever we need volunteers, it seems like the residents need to step up. And the things that you're doing are things that I have done in the past or would like to do in the future. So, I'm definitely really glad you put this together. I think this is great to have this. And if there's really a dire emergency, we want our firefighters, they may need to be out in the field. Having somebody back is a shelter or whatever, another helping hand is just great. And I'm really encouraged, and I was happy to see so many people at the first meeting.
Yes.
We have lots of meetings, and sometimes you never know who's gonna show up. Sometimes one or two people show up. In this case, it was at least 15, I think.
Yeah, it was
showed
about
up. So,
that.
Yeah, so it was a great turnout, and thank you for doing this.
My pleasure.
So, thanks for coming in. One, fantastic, you got a grant. Even without the grant, this is something that we should look at as being part of, on an ongoing basis. So keep us apprised as to what you need for that. I assume that even though we had 20 people show up and you had some, we don't want to discourage people. There's plenty of opportunity for people to come and learn. So I encourage everybody to come on Wednesday. I'll be there on Wednesday. I was away last week, but I'll be there this Wednesday, Old Town Hall, 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock.
Anything else that we can do to help?
I just think that, we're just gonna keep it out there in the social media, and, we're gonna try and keep the team engaged, and when the team is doing something, whether it's training or it's going to an event, we'll make sure everybody knows about it and keep people aware of what's going on.
Terrific.
Fantastic. Yeah, I mean, this is great. Love to see it. Unfortunately, there will be events that happen, and, we need to be prepared for it, and I think that this is fantastic for you folks to get ahead of it, and I know that you are great professionals in this, so it'll be good to learn as to some of the things that people can do as well. So, anything else we needed on there, Colin?
Nope.
Chief Russell, anything?
Nope.
Well, I appreciate
Having us.
we appreciate
Thank
you
you.
coming
Thank you
in.
for coming.
Thanks very much.
Appreciate you doing this.
Have a good night.
Thank you very much.
Excellent. Next item, presentation, information technology, our town IT infrastructure assessment. Tom, come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You have a presentation for us?
Yes.
I will give you the floor.
All right.
Take it away.
Just a few slides to go through. Thank you for having me tonight. I know it's a very busy season with budgets and everything. So I did this in a previous community, and I thought that it was important to present this to the select board and just kind of get a sense of where we're at. Just to start, I'm not going to read the mission and vision statements for the department, but overall, the general purpose is for my department to support the goals and objectives of the town by pushing the innovation, basically. Before we get into the assessment, I just want to go over a couple numbers that I find kind of important and interesting. The technology department serves approximately 140 part-time and full-time employees across 9 buildings. 3 of these do not have any staff but have a technology presence. We have about 146 workstations, 57 printers, 16 servers, and all of this is covered by 1.5 full-time equivalent employees. Okay. On to the overview. So just to get started, just kind of a little bit on my methodology. I truly believe that before you can decide where you want to go, you need to start with knowing where you currently are. From there, it's a matter of deciding the best path forward and what the priorities are. With that in mind, I tried to capture a snapshot of the current state of the town's technology. Some of this information may be considered subjective, but I also tried to utilize measurable data that can be used to compare in future assessments. I then put some time into a basic SWOT analysis. I believe a deeper dive into this may be useful, and I would certainly look for some support in doing that. I finally wrapped up the assessment with some recommendations, actions, improvements that I believe the town should consider. You do have the full assessment in your packet, I believe, but I definitely do not want to read through that page by page because it is fairly lengthy. Okay. So just a little bit of an overview here. On the workstations, just a couple of data points. Right now, the workstations consist of a combination of laptops and desktops that are used regularly by employees to perform their jobs. You can see that there is a slightly higher percentage of laptops than desktops. Part of this is in response to COVID-19. Some employees were issued a second computer for remote work. However, there's also partially a shift to deployment of laptops to department managers to be able to allow them easier access for meetings and training events. We'll also see that the majority of the computers are currently running Windows 10, but that will continue to shift as Windows 11 computers are replaced. 10 additional computers are actually sitting in the IT department right now, ready to be deployed. All the computers ordered through the technology department run a professional version of the operating system. The one outlier running a home operating system was actually purchased directly by a staff member through a grant, I believe it was. That leads to the age profile. So I mentioned the fact that we have 10 computers being replaced right now. Right now, I run basically a 0 to 4 year age. I like to replace all my workstations within 4 years. 3 years we run with a warranty. Then an additional year, we kind of cross our fingers a little bit. This has come up over the years in, I've been asked why so frequently in comparison to home computers lasting, 10 years in some cases. The issue that I found with this is reliability. With a home computer, if it goes down, I may not be able to get to my email, I may not be able to do my online banking. But in this setting, we're actually impacting productivity, not only for the employee that uses that workstation, but the IT department itself. And if we're relying on increased demand on those machines and waiting for them to break, that downtime could be several days waiting for parts to come in if it's not covered under warranty. So I do want to continue that 4-year replacement plan. I will say with that, everything is kind of planned out for that 4 years, but each year I do evaluate if there is a machine that should be replaced or if we're converting something to a laptop sooner. There will always be some computers that will be outside that 4 years, and that's primarily our kiosk machines and then the loaner computers that I keep as a reserve in case someone needs to get there. Okay. Next data point is our printers. The town currently has 57 printers, including multiple specialty printers, label printers specifically, at the police department, as well as a printer that is used primarily for printing payroll and AP checks here in Town Hall. We do have a fairly large number, a large concentration of printers in this building. I did look at the ratios of the printers. Multiple sources say the ideal employee to printer ratio for a business is 10 to 1, with the average being 4 to 1. For this assessment, I didn't want to take employees, but I took workstations because we do have some workstations that are shared. And you'll see that most of the buildings are well outside of that. So I would like to address that over time. I'm not looking to remove any printers that are functioning, but as they break, we will certainly consider whether or not replacement is actually appropriate. I do want to highlight that there are a couple of buildings that are listed as a higher density ratio. That's the fire department and the sewer department. Those are actually at minimum for what I would recommend for those buildings anyway, based on the number of workstations. Moving on to our network connectivity. All of our town buildings are connected by the private fiber network that the town has invested in through grants over the years. That all terminates here in this building. The primary internet connection for all departments except for the police is in this building. Police has their own internet connection as well. We do have some redundancy set up through that fiber network between those connections. That was actually an achievement that we got this past year. Okay. Moving on, our online presence. Currently, the town has 28 websites and social media accounts that I was able to discover across all the town departments. it's a fairly broad patch, and I don't know how well some of these are maintained. That is an assessment that we should probably take into account as well. And then looked for technology policies. There are a number of policies out there, most of which are at least 5 years old, and we should definitely be looking to review those. Actually, I do have several drafts in progress that I will be bringing to Colin to also bring to this board at a later date. Getting into the SWOT analysis, I just want to highlight, I can speak today, a couple of the points here. I wanted to highlight that we do have an agile staff. Myself and my assistant were able to pivot in our tasks pretty quickly and learn what we need to do. But this is also still a limitation in knowledge. 1.5 people cannot possibly be an expert in every aspect of technology, so it does lead to some threats for the town and some lacking. We do have some opportunities out there, whether it be investing and partnering with other organizations, be it the schools, be it other communities, state, whatever. Actually, Media Director Roney brought a couple contacts to me for the state this past week, so for cyber protection, so we can be evaluating that. Alternate funding sources, grants particularly. Cost reduction measures. There's always 2 ways to meet budget. There's either raise funding or reduce expenses. So I do recognize the fact that we need to look at our expenses and try to be creative and reduce where we can. Okay. Improving the efficiencies within the existing investments. This is evaluating all of our software, our hardware, making sure that we're using it to the best of our ability in the town and making sure that all the features are being used. And then also training. That's both for technology staff and broader staff on using the technology that we have. A couple of the threats, staff turnover. We do have, again, only 2 people, with most of that knowledge residing with myself. And it's kind of brought to mind a phrase that was raised to me in a previous community. That's the key man issue, and that's basically if all of the knowledge is in one person, and that person wins the lottery and decides that they no longer need to be working, the town can find themselves in a big hole. And this actually applies to a lot of the departments within the town, so it's something that we should look at. Increasing cyber incidents. This is in the landscape. It can be considered a matter of a matter of when, not if, that the town is going to experience a cyber incident. So we just need to be prepared and take the measures that we can to prevent it as best we can. Okay. Physical loss of facilities. If we lose this building, can we relocate the employees? Can we relocate technology easily? And then damage to our fiber network. So with each building connecting back to this building, if a tree does come down on the lines, we may experience some interruption in service to those buildings. We do have a contract and warranty with the installer, and they are very responsive, but it is still something that we just need to be aware of. Okay. And then moving on, I'm going to just highlight a couple of the recommendations here. This is a list of all the recommendations that I put into the full report. Everything that is marked with an asterisk is something that was included in my initial request for budgeting this year. My understanding is that some of that we need to balance with the overall needs of the town, but it is there. Okay. So the first thing I want to cover is the creation of the Cyber Incident Response Plan. This is something that will allow us to have a playbook, really, if we do experience, or as I said earlier, when we do experience something. It will identify the key people that need to be involved, their roles, and the steps to be taken. This is important for when someone's not available, that's, there's at least knowledge there. There is grants available for this, but we do run the risk of having to wait longer for that grant cycle. Okay. Implementing multi-factor authentication, we do currently have that available and enabled on town email. I'm looking to actually enable that on workstation logins. This basically takes that password and makes the password, even if that gets compromised, almost useless until you have the second authentication. This will be on, as I said, workstations, VPN access. Another key thing for that is that some cyber insurance providers, including Maya, are starting to require that. I do not know that we've heard anything that it is being required in this renewal cycle, but at some point it will come. Okay. Social media and website archiving. Under public records laws, the town is required to maintain all written documents, physical and electronic. And in my opinion, that does cover websites and social media postings. So I believe that the town should be taking steps to protect the archive of that and make sure we maintain control. Okay. Increasing our internal staff, I've mentioned a couple times, the limitations of staffing. So I am certainly asking that we reconsider increasing to at least 2 full-time staff within the IT department this year. This will provide better coverage for vacations as well as illness, as well as greater opportunities to continue to learn. Actually, this year's proposal, similar to last year, is a joint effort with the media department, so it would provide a little bit of coverage in both departments. Another way to fortify that knowledge base and availability is potential partnerships with a managed service provider to either provide the 24-hour support or, as I said, just back up the knowledge, whether it be network support or servers or whatever the decision is. And then, as I mentioned, policy review, that's going to just be an ongoing thing, and I'll try to bring those back to you, not necessarily all at once, because that will just be a lot of minutia to get into. That's what I have for you tonight. I'm open to any questions on what I've highlighted or the full report, if you prefer.
All right, I'll open it up to the board. Who wants to start?
I'll go.
Okay, Mr. Cohane.
So first of all, thank you for coming in front of us, and a great job on the Munis implementation.
Thank you.
One of the tougher things to do is to migrate a financial system. And as I think I've said multiple times, and hopefully the residents know, we went from a paper-based system to actually a computer system. So it was a great, they were able to do that, and I know there's a lot more to do now that we actually have it installed. So, as for the presentation, the things when I was reading your assessment, one thing that really popped in, kind of reinforced is, I know with COVID, everybody did get more laptops and whatever. So now all of a sudden, as you point out, we have laptops and workstations. So, and the cost savings, I think you said it was $3,500 to $4,500 could be easily saved. So when I look at, possibly getting a new IT department, an IT person, not department, sorry about that, person. Not trying to hint on anything or anything, but, when I first heard about, increasing the hours, the first thing I thought of is what efficiencies can we gain? And when I read your document, there was multiple ones that I would just like to see as goals once we get this person on to allow us to actually save money. A lot of people think that when you actually add somebody, you're increasing your cost, but that's not necessarily the case. And with money coming from the PEG Center, and then what you've shown with efficiencies here, and we just really make that a priority, it actually could be a cost savings if we do it right. So You know, and as for printers, you know, I've gone through that, tried to reduce printers before in different organizations, and thank you for bringing it up, and good luck, Colin, because it's all gonna come to you. Nobody likes to give up their printer, believe me. But, you know, the ratio is pretty shocking, actually, so I think that is something. And printers are a pain in the butt, you know, they're always breaking and everything else, and there's maintenance costs and hardware costs and everything else. So, but I think with reducing the workstations and the cost of those workstations, plus the software and the printers, I think we could pay for an IT person if we expedite that and make that a priority when that person comes on board.
I will say that the reduction in the number of workstations will be over time. I'm not looking to, you know, yank a laptop away from someone that has it right now, but
It's not yanking it away, but do you really need it, is a
Right.
question you can ask
There's some of
employees.
that,
Do you
yes.
really need, you know, do you really need 2 workstations? And there might be some people who give it up, and then over time, you do that. But, you know, I think we need to actually reduce that, because there are maintenance costs associated with that also, right? A lot of maintenance costs. And then I saw you're also in there, I knew there was one more thing, about the Microsoft products. I'm a Microsoft guy, but, you know, if everybody's using, you know, Excel on the web or whatever, you know, maybe that is the right thing to do. You know, I don't know, but I think when I read your document, there's multiple places where we could be saving money. And I was, you know, when your predecessor was here, Jason, we went through a lot of different ways he was able to save money. And then you got buried with Munis. So it was like, you know, yeah, that was the goal, right? You had to get Munis, that was the most important priority. But now I think we can kind of get back to some of these things, and I think you highlighted them very well. And so, thank you for the presentation.
Who's next? Go ahead, Mr. Schneider.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I think it was really good. The thing that struck me is on the threats and the creating of the cyber incidents response plan. You know, coming right on the heels of the fire department's presentation of having a response team for emergencies, and I agree with you. It's not a matter of if, but when we have an incident. I think that is of utmost importance that we have a response team and a written response plan to your point, you know, that we know what we're doing when something happens. So I certainly support anything we can do in that regards. What was the other thing I was going to ask about? I think that's the most important one. Oh, you know, the issue that you brought up about that you carry most of that knowledge, that institutional knowledge, you know, it resides in your head. Is there a way that we can document that so that the day you hit the lottery, we're not left with a just big hole?
That's a good question. It actually highlights something that was also in there, was the lack of documentation. And part of the issue right now is that we spend so much time responding to end user needs that we often neglect updating documents. So that is something that I do want to make another priority, is getting back to that documentation and you know, make it that someone can step in. They may not be able to do it fully, but they at least have somewhere to start. Actually, I ended up having to do that this past summer because I had the opportunity to take 3 weeks off in a row, and I think that was a stress inducer for multiple staff members and department managers. So
I'd say a wake-up call.
yes.
Thank you.
Please.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I do have a question.
Yes.
Do you find that there's any kind of correlation between an increase in cyber attacks and the fact that we have so many staff that actually take their laptops home?
I don't believe there is. I believe that the greatest risk does sit between the seat and the keyboard, but it doesn't matter where that is.
So the physical location of them having a laptop is not something that we
No, because we do have the protections on the laptop itself as well, which is another step that we took this year, is that is a managed antivirus, so they're actually actively watching for threats and responding to it.
And can you just tell me a little bit more? I'm interested in this multi-factor authentication. Can you maybe expand a little bit on what that might look like? How difficult is it to roll something like that out?
So I've been trying out a solution actually for myself. It would basically be log into the computer, the interface might be slightly different. It'll still ask for the same username and password, but then it will ask for a code from your phone, or for those people that don't have a smartphone or don't want to use their personal smartphone for that, we can actually get a token key, which has a random generator. So you can either be entering that, I think it's a 6-digit number. Alternatively, we can actually do a push option where, again, on a smartphone, the alert actually comes up on my phone that someone has tried to access the account, and I say approve or deny, and it takes it from there.
And is that something difficult to roll out? What is that?
This particular solution will be touching each workstation, but we do that on a regular basis anyway to make sure that the patch management is working properly. So it would roll out relatively smoothly from a technology standpoint. An end user standpoint, there will certainly be some pushback, but it's akin to putting a deadbolt on your front door.
Thank you very much.
You ever use Google Authenticator as the thing that creates that token?
Some systems you can. The particular system that I've been looking at, it's a proprietary one. So that there's pros and cons to every solution out there.
Okay, ready?
Uh-oh.
No, this is fun. Because this is what I do. I deal with this all the time.
Mr. IT, we call him.
So a couple things. One, from a multi-factor authentication, it's a must. I mean, we have to do it. I understand that there may be a cultural thing. I mean, I have 1,000 employees and 1,200 devices, and we rolled it out fairly easily just because it is a must. It's one of those things. I'm very surprised that the insurance carriers our insurance carrier is not requiring it. I know my company's insurance carrier has been requiring it for years. So I think that's a must, and if I can help you in any way on that as far as advice, I think we need an incident response plan. I'd like to see us not just have the plan, but it needs to be tested. You know, that you can do a round table where you can do simulations. I think that's where the real value is, because putting something on paper doesn't really test real-world situations when the stress is on. It's great that you can have it on paper and say this person's responsible, but the simulations, yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, sorry. So I actually had received 2 quotes for this because I was looking for grants.
Yep.
And both quotes did include a roundtable exercise as well.
Fantastic. So glad that that's in there, because I think the plan is okay. I just don't think it goes far enough. Relative to some of these items, you got policies, you've got grants, you got all those things. Do we have options with NEMCOG or MMA to help us with, I'm fairly certain that there are policies that are fairly standard across municipalities. We should leverage those wherever possible, and if we need to perhaps make additional connections to make that part of your job easier, we need to do that. Similarly, are there opportunities for, obviously there are approved vendors and things like that, but to help with some of these things, like, I look at, you don't have it on the list, but periodic penetration tests is kind of a must, but it goes hand in hand with a vulnerability management program. So it's one thing to try to break in. You also want to do a vulnerability assessment where you can have devices that will run outside your network and look for things there, but you want something inside your network that's looking for known vulnerabilities, things where, I've got a firewall that's out of date, I've got this computer that's 10 years old and running an old version of Java that can be exploited. So, I think it's pen tests and a vulnerability management program to look at some of those things. It is definitely a when and not an if on the cyber. And sorry if I scare people, but I've made my company very paranoid, and it's a good thing. I think that, you know, the machines, the age of the machines, I think it's important for people to understand. So in the private space, we do between 3 and 3.5 years. So 4 years is definitely not too quickly. You know, that's pretty standard. The technology changes, reliability changes. There's a lot of those sorts of things where you really need to do that. I'd like to understand how we can better integrate with the school. You know, there are some of these things. I think it's a challenge where there are resources that are being spent in the school, presumably for some of the same things that we're doing. And that's where I think we can get some efficiencies. I think that, you know, if they're doing their policies and we're doing our policies and we're doing pen tests, you know, separately, I think we tried to do this with some of the assessments to get together. I think the reality is that disjointed thing, and I know you've tried to reach out, I think we need to fix that because that is costing the town money. And, you know, we need to work across those groups to address that. I think those are most of them. I think that, you know, you might have, I think there's opportunities in there that you've talked about as far as our online accounts and consolidating some of those, and because those are potential threat vectors. I think that, you know, people taking their laptop home, that's a threat vector as well. You know, there's certainly things that antivirus will help with, but, you know, impersonations and helping to deal with socially engineered phishing attacks, I think there's a lot of opportunities here for us to tighten things up. And printing, I can tell you, since COVID, I hope that we can print a lot less. I know in my company, our printing got cut to 1/3 of what we were doing. We printed all the time. It was an engineering firm, and so we'd have big drafts and all these things, tons of printing, and we got rid of it. I know that municipalities will struggle because a lot of things have to be printed, but I think we just need to figure out how we better manage that and leverage electronic versions. You know, I still see some things on our site which are, you know, forms that somebody's got to print out and do things. Let's get electronic versions of these forms. I know the new website is going to be rolling out very soon, and a lot of these capabilities come as part of that. I think we just need to have people understand that, you know, even with the annual report, I know that we'll have printed copies. That's not going away, but do we need as many as we did before? No, we don't. You know, it's not just a cost savings. There's the environmental savings. There's all these things that we just need to start thinking about it and reducing the waste. And I see some good things in here where you're looking to reduce some waste and streamline some things. So in looking at it, I don't have anything that I sit there and go, oh, Tom doesn't know what he's doing. These are the right areas to be working on. I know that there's not enough time to do them. You know, documentation is the classic. Always goes last. When there's a fire, push away your documentation, and that's where we might want to look to leverage interns. You know, I know we've got innovation and some, maybe there's opportunities to do those types of things. I think that we have, I don't want to take any away your interns.
No, you can have them.
But just for things like that, I think we just have to be creative in how we address some of these problems. Because I know when you're in the middle of it and you know, the fires are happening, it's really hard to see where you can get some of those opportunities. So I think this is good. I think it's a good start, right? We're not going to sit here a year from now, and I can guarantee you not all these things are going to be able to be achieved. It's just there's not enough time given the bandwidth that you have and the number of people that you have. But let's start chipping away at it.
Yeah, just a couple things.
Sure.
So with our antivirus contract, we do actually get an annual. I know it's not as good, but at least they do some pen testing for us annually.
Yep.
I do think it should be done more frequently.
Mm-hmm.
On updates, we do operated patch management on all workstations, so we can see patch level on everything.
Yeah.
All of our switches are managed, so one pane of glass now I can go in and see that, which is great. So a lot of these things definitely are in there. The other thing I will say is that I did apply, and I believe we were accepted, or at least initially accepted for the cyber training again this year for employees. So since you guys have town emails, you will probably be enrolled as well. So you will have the pain of that training. But the state has gone through a new vendor this year, so it'll be slightly different.
Yeah, we all did it.
I think this is like our third year, right?
Yeah,
This is third year participating.
I tend to, I've been doing every other year now, because I think while every year would be useful and beneficial, I think it also gets very tedious on employees that are already stretched on their time, so.
You could,
Only do Paul's test so many times.
you can consider micro-learning. So I went away from 1 year, 1 hour per year type of thing, which is somewhat standard, maybe 45 minutes. And there's micro-learning when you can do 5 minutes a month, because you want it top of mind, right? It's one of those things, if you do it once a year, okay, it might stick for 2 weeks. Really, you need it. It's like when they're getting ready to click on something, that's when you need it. Oh, I don't want to be clicking on that. So there's different ways to attack that.
Which I will say that the employees have responded well, because I generally get that question of, is this a legitimate email? I said,
Yep.
well, I don't know, use your training, but no, they at least ask, and some of them are very fearful of clicking on the wrong link, so that's, instilling fear is not a bad thing in our world.
Fantastic. But like I said, I think this is really good. I appreciate you coming in. I'd like to see, hopefully, something next year, same type of thing on a regular basis, just to kind of understand. We want to have residents be connected and up to date and leveraging things on a more real-time basis. Well, the systems have to come with that. So thank you for coming in. Colin, was there anything that you needed to make sure we covered?
Nope.
Excellent.
covered it all.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Tom. We appreciate it.
All right. I believe we're now going to go to 7A, which is new business, fee adjustments, building, plumbing, gas, and electrical permit fees. Mr. Welcome.
Good evening.
If I could just give a quick introduction on this item.
Yes, of course, please.
So Paul's here tonight asking the select board to consider adjusting the fees that we collect on the permits that you mentioned, building permits, plumbing permits, gas permits, and electrical permits. It's worth noting that the board hasn't updated these fees since at least 2011. And over the last several months, Paul has been looking closely at what other communities are doing. It's something he's talked to me about quite a bit. And the goal of this process was to ensure that we weren't leaving any money on the table and that we were remaining competitive with our neighboring communities. The way that fees in this industry are calculated is slightly convoluted. I now understand a lot better than I did. But in general, what you're seeing tonight represents a 25% fee increase across the board. It shifts as our fee structure has always been. There's a higher burden on the commercial side than on the residential side. We are recommending, if the board is amenable, to implement this effective March 1st. That'll just give us time to make sure that people are aware of the fee increases, but also for us to go into our permitting software and make sure that we've made the changes in a timely manner. So the fee structure is included in your packet. Again, it's a 25% increase. It mirrors several of our neighboring communities. Paul, if you want to, if I missed anything, or if there's anything you want to add about how you took the approach. This also reflects input from our electrical inspector and our plumbing and gas inspector as well.
And the reason why I started looking at this is because it was mostly because of electrical and plumbing. The fees weren't even covering the cost of the inspectors and the administrative work. I think everything is fair if you compare us to, other towns, close by. You got Lexington that is in the same range as us. You got Chelmsford, which is actually $15 per thousand across the board for everything. I think that's a little bit high, and I would just like to see an adjustment to better run the department and make sure that we're paying for all the administrative costs and all the inspection costs.
So I will open it up to the board for questions or comments. Anybody want to start?
I'll start. Thank you for
Please.
coming in. Obviously, this is not my expertise, right? But when you look at, right, the permit fee structure and the way that it's written out, first, you can see that there's some kind of uniformity to it, right? I know that it might be a little bit convoluted, but to me, who doesn't really understand the business that well, I can understand this
Perfect.
Good.
pretty upfront, right? Which I think is a positive thing. Second, I mean, I don't see anything in here. Is there anything, and I guess it's gonna be a comment and a question to you, right? Because I'm not so familiar with the fees to begin with, right? These all look pretty reasonable. Is there anything in here you think that we as a town are going to have trouble getting? You think that there's things that we're gonna have issues with?
I do not see any, no, I don't see any issues with any of these fees. You know, the minimum fee was $50.
Right.
You got the administrative cost of her, you know, her going through the permit. Then you got the administrative cost of Joe or Kenny or myself looking at the permit.
Yep.
And then actually going out and doing the inspections. You know, most inspections, an electrical inspection could take anywhere, you know, on a single-family home, you're probably looking at about an hour inspection.
Yep.
You know, on the high school, you're looking at 2 to 3 hours on a commercial building. So I don't think there is absolutely nothing here that is unreasonable. And that's why I propose this, because I pay fees myself, and I don't like high fees or unreasonable fees.
And do you think that the fee structure as it's written now accurately covers those costs that you were just talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
And if I can note to your point, the only item on here that jumped, I would say, more substantially than the rest is the final fee on the last page, the grandfathered lot package. I think we were previously charging something like $150 or $200, but this has to be reviewed multiple times by town council, so that wasn't even covering the fee that we were paying town council to look at those. So we're now recommending $500, which again is in line with the research that we've done. It was a steeper increase than what we were charging before, but again, we were losing money paying town council to review these, and I don't think they happen all that frequently.
Yeah, you might, I don't think I've seen one in 3 years. But it is true, town council has to do the deed research on that property all the way back to 1955. I have to review it myself, which I like the idea of town council looking at it, because they're better at it than I am. But that is, I'm sure that town council is not gonna charge us less than $500 to do that.
It's getting personal.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Schneider?
You know, with everyone else, I guess, as much as I don't want to overpay for fees, I think this puts us more at a market rate for what other towns are charging. And certainly, we want to cover the costs of any of these inspections. So I think that, though the percentage seems high, the actual dollar amount is really not that significant. And so I'm fully in favor of doing that. Thank you.
And as everybody keeps saying, you know, it makes us it's more competitive to what other communities are doing around us. So that was the key, my first question when I saw this. I asked Colin, what are the other communities charging, right? And so I didn't want to charge more. I want to charge competitive or less. And that's
Correct,
usually the way
yeah.
that we do. And it sounds like that's
I want to be
exactly-
fair.
Yep.
Yeah, fairness is good.
Yep.
And just to go to the plumbing and, you know, when we did the fees back in 2011, the plumbing and electrical were not included in that year. They were probably back from 2000, probably back to 99. When those were adjusted, so that's what brought to my attention the fees that made me start looking at it. Was I started seeing the electrical fees and I was like, no, this can't happen.
Well, we appreciate you looking at this and then bringing it to our attention, because I hadn't realized we hadn't raised it for a while either, or that we were way below the market rate. So thank you very much for looking into this and bringing it forward to us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, again, I think, you know, to echo, I think this keeps us in line. I don't think this is not going to slow down anything that somebody does. I don't think it's gonna be something where somebody who was going to pull a permit is now not going to pull a permit. I think this is reasonable. I think it's consistent with what we're seeing in the area. I do think it's something that let's keep our eyes on this and the pulse, and if, you know, we can always adjust. You know, I think it's something where I trust the professionals that we have that are in these roles and you know, what they do every day, and I am looking at you, Paul. You're good at this, so.
Done this a while.
So, you know, I look at it and say, you're the best person to look at these things, and, you know, obviously some of the homework that's been done at the, you know, town manager's level. I think this is good. I think let's do it, and, you know, feel free to come in, you know, not 13 years from now, if you need an adjustment, come on in and let's talk. So with that, I guess I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board approve the permit fee proposal as presented effective March 1st, 2024.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That carries 400.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Have a great night.
You too.
You too. All right, you want to do town manager report?
Yes, please.
All right. I know you guys have been kind of quiet over there. I know Kat's chomping at the bit.
All right. Tyngsborough was invited to participate in the CGI video project, which is a partnership with the National League of Cities. The program offers a free video profile of the community, which can focus on a variety of areas you choose. Some of those include open space, recreation, economic development, and more. The video is produced and provided to the community free of charge. And the company that produces the video, I know you're wondering how do they make their money, they reach out to businesses in the community to see if they want to advertise on the landing page. There's no minimum number of sponsorships required, so if we enter into an agreement with them, they do our video profile and 0 Tyngsborough businesses sign up, we still get the video for free. The city of Gardner recently participated. They did theirs last year, and it's available on their home screen or their homepage to watch. Adam is currently reviewing the agreement just to make sure that everything is above board. If there's no issues, we'll sign the agreement, and we would be filmed in the spring series. So we'd probably launch it in our new website in this fall. Following up on a request from the board at a previous meeting, I've confirmed that National Grid will attend your meeting on February 12th to talk about the recent storms and power outages. I also expect, and Paul just left on this item, but one of the lingering things our Fire Chief Russell and Paul have been communicating with National Grid about is this natural gas issue that took place during that storm at the development behind the Council on Aging. We were very pleased to learn that National Grid conducted a meeting with the management company and the residents today at 3 p.m. I don't know how it went. We did get quite a bit of feedback last week from residents that they were concerned National Grid wasn't being responsive because, as a recap, when the power went out, all of their natural gas generators kicked on. It was resulting in high carbon monoxide levels in some of the units. The fire department, as a precaution, alerted residents to disconnect the gas generators until we could figure out what the issue is. It's looking like some of the units have undersized gas meters, which is causing the furnaces to act wonky, and that's what was emitting the carbon monoxide. So I'll get an update from National Grid on how the meeting went today at 3. That's really what the residents were looking for. So whether or not they come to your meeting on the 12th, I'm not sure, but I anticipate the National Grid will be prepared to give some sort of update on that as well. I also wanted to recognize Paul. We received an email late last week from residents that during that exact same storm lost power. One of the residents that was included on the email requires oxygen, and they just wanted to note that Paul went above and beyond on a holiday to make sure that everything was lined up, that the electrical inspection was done so it could be reconnected, and leveraged his existing connections with National Grid to make sure that that unit was on a priority list. So wanted to highlight things that are going well. We got notified today by the Massachusetts Cultural Council that our fiscal year 24 allotment through their grant cycle is $8,700, which is an increase over last year. Those funds are allocated by the Tyngsborough Cultural Council for community programming. Much of that happens at the Council on Aging and the library. So the Council on Aging does a great job leveraging these grant funds to add additional programming to a program they're already planning. But it's a great hit as always. This was mentioned a little bit this evening, but the town's new website is on track for a launch early next month. The last 2 weeks, and will continue this week, town staff have spent a lot of time learning the new platform, understanding how to edit content. We've broken it up into site admins and users, and our goal is really to ensure that all of our departments have the knowledge and the ability to update their own pages. Our current website is maxed out, and so we do a lot of kind of workarounds to get things to work, so we don't have many departments using the site directly. It's all kind of done through our office or IT, but with Civic Plus, it's gonna be a department-driven, and even in some cases, board-driven updates. So it'll be really exciting to launch that. I was pleased to join the Tyngsborough Public Schools and Middle School Building Committee and Mr. Schneider and Mr. Eldridge this weekend to walk through the new middle school site. The project is coming along nicely. It's on track to be, it's tied to the schedule. I also just wanted to highlight that last week the MSBA notified us that the relief funding that we were expecting to come in at 4.1 million is actually coming in closer to 4.7 million. So we have the signed amendment. I signed it today. We're waiting on a couple signatures from the school committee, and we'll solidify that. The budget that we presented at town meeting in October remains the budget. We're still on track to complete it for that amount, so all positive news on that front. Speaking of interns, we have Adario Miranda from Innovation Academy working in our office this semester. He's currently helping us look at licensing processing to compare us to neighboring communities, not just in terms of fees, but to see how they do theirs so that we can, again, remain competitive. He's also expressed an interest in helping in our recreation department and with public safety. I wanted to call attention to the Board of Health's series of free classes and workshops that they're hosting. This is being put on in partnership with the Northeast Public Health Alliance, which is the regional health coalition Tyngsborough is the lead community on. They have a variety of seminars. All of them are free to residents of Middlesex County. They include youth mental health, blood pressure, dementia, cholesterol, and workshops around decluttering. So we just posted all of those on our website. You do need to register for most of them. There's a mix of some in-person. Some of the in-person ones are here in Tyngsborough, some are in Tewksbury, and quite a few are offered virtually. And then finally, I just wanted to note that at the Massachusetts Municipal Association meeting on January 19th, Governor Healy announced the Municipal Empowerment Act, which is aimed to address efficiency and revenue challenges for municipalities. I've included a full copy of the summary in your correspondence, but I wanted to highlight a few. You'll note, if you were following this, one of the items that she mentioned at the conference was amending the liquor laws so that municipalities could determine how many is right for them. Right now, as this board is well aware, anytime we want an additional liquor license, we have to file a lengthy home rule petition. This was included in her proposal on Saturday, and on Monday her office walked it back and said that they were no longer filing that, but if the legislature was interested, her office would support it. So that's something that we'll mention to our delegation when they come in at the tri-board meeting, because I think that that's really the flexibility municipalities need. Anyway, what is still included is extending some of the making permanent some of the COVID-era changes to the open meeting law, which will permit us to continue to have either fully remote or hybrid meetings, amending the procurement laws, which is a huge win for municipalities, so that the 30B threshold would raise to $100,000. It also, this will mean nothing to any of you, but me and Kat are rejoicing, will eliminate the use of combis, which is the most archaic system. I still today don't know how to use it. I use it every time I post on it, but I couldn't tell you why. They're authorizing a process for allowing exemptions from post-retirement limitations to address workforce challenges. This was big in public safety when they were having a hard time hiring folks during the pandemic. It is going to eliminate the need for us to print hard copies of the annual town report. As was mentioned earlier, we've already been reducing, and with our new format, which has a lot of graphics, Jackie and I have already talked about what really is the appropriate amount for us to have in person. It's going to extend the COVID-era outdoor dining provisions. It will authorize town administrator contracts to be set for a duration of 5 years as opposed to 3. It's going to increase flexibility for municipalities to share the chief financial officer position and to establish regional board of assessors, increase the allowable term for a bond on a school project from 30 years to 40 years, given that our debt exclusion vote happened before this, I mean, this isn't even law yet, she hasn't filed it, it likely won't apply to us for this current project, but it is still a good flexibility for municipalities. One unique area, which won't impact this town meeting likely, but if it is passed, will impact our next one, is that it's gonna allow municipalities to directly expend the PEG funds without having to have a town meeting warrant article. It will establish a local option motor vehicle excise surcharge of 5%, and it establishes and increases several different local tax options for different categories of local receipts.
Yeah,
The
there's
last,
a lot of stuff there.
Yes.
So,
well, the last two are really up to the municipality if they want to bring that forward. So it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. So when people look at this, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. It's just there's the option to do it.
Correct.
yeah, and as you stated, this is not in effect.
Correct.
So this is what is being proposed and may come into effect, and we'll address some of these. Yeah, even like I saw some folks perhaps assuming that it eliminates the requirement to print a physical copy of the annual town report, assuming that, one, it mandates that you won't print one, but, which is not true, and it doesn't mean that we won't print them.
Right.
You know, it just means that you're kind of right-sizing. We're kind of going down that road anyway to sit there and say, gee, we end up with hundreds of these annual reports that sit in boxes, and you say, wow, that's a waste. Any other questions on Collins? I figure we might as well break it up on any of his updates, and then we'll get to Kat's.
And just a late breaking, I did confirm Jushi is going to be at the select board's meeting on February 12th.
As well. So we'll have National Grid and
Yes.
Jushi. Okay. Any other questions relative to his updates?
Nope.
All right. Assistant Town Manager's report. Take it away, Kat.
Thank you. I only have 3 for you, so be quick. Invitation for bids were due for the highway line painting project on January 17th. The town awarded the work to Atlantic Pavement Markings, Inc. out of Rhode Island, who will be coordinating with the highway department to start line painting on several roads in town beginning sometime this spring. Second, we have released a request for proposals for economic development brochures through an economic development earmark from the state. The town is looking to have designed and printed 500 brochures to share with new and interested businesses. I do have examples from the town of Drake, if anyone's interested from the public, or if the board wants to look at what we're using, sort of model what we're looking for. Staff have formed an internal task force to determine how to best spend the opioid settlement payments the town will be receiving over the next several years. The group has met only once, but it consists of representatives from the police, fire, health, library, and veteran services departments. At this time, the town has received a little over $51,000 in payments, and the state is really encouraging municipalities to collaborate, engage with the community impacted by the opioid epidemic, and leverage existing local and state resources when determining how to use these funds.
Great.
That's all I have.
Questions, comments on those? Excellent. Well, thank you again for the update. I think that these are really good if residents can't watch everything in our meetings, and I don't blame you if you don't want to watch all of it, but I think that's the meat. It's available online afterwards. People can also subscribe to get it via email. So get these updates. There's a lot of stuff that's happening, and it's good to be kept abreast of all the situations that are there. All right, you ready for the budget presentation?
Absolutely.
All right, who's kicking it off?
I will kick it off quickly.
All right, Colin.
And I want to just, as a full disclaimer for the board and for folks watching at home, this is a very early presentation of our budget. We'll talk about some of the assumptions we had to make as we go forward, but this will be a living document for the next couple of months until we're ready to finalize it. So just a little bit about the budget approach and process. We adopted a very similar approach that we've used in previous years, and I think that approach has worked well in Tyngsborough. We take a very conservative approach to estimating our revenues. We look very closely at the trends. We look very closely at how we're doing in our current fiscal year. And we use that to determine exactly how much we can spend. And then we work on what we can afford. And the instructions we send to departments every year is maintain the same level of service that you're providing. And if you think that your department needs a new position, send us a memo separately and we'll consider it. Let us know what the impact is, the impact of not doing it. And I do think that this approach, while certainly painful at times for some of our department heads, has enabled us to be in what I think is a positive financial position when you look at some of our neighbors. Most of our neighbors in fiscal -- are looking at overrides. And unless something totally dramatic happens between now and town meeting, we're not in that position. So, you know, we have to find the balance, right, between hindering growth within our operations, but also making sure that we can continue to afford our the level of service that residents have come to maintain. In terms of the process, we sent out budget instructions in early November to department heads and gave them until December 21st to send us their requests. We met with every single department, whether their budget was increasing or not, to really understand what is essential in your budget, what have you been doing, and are there ways that we can achieve the same level of service, perhaps for less, and how can different departments work together so that we're achieving the end goal of balancing the budget and delivering the same level of service. We also spent quite a bit of time with, and David will talk about this under revenue, with all of the departments that have their hand in new growth and in our various revenue sources to really make sure that we were maximizing what we're anticipating, but doing that conservatively. And, you know, I probably dozens of times begged David and Lauren to let me assume a different number for our revenue. But again, all of that we did very conservatively. So David's going to walk the board through the revenue side, and then I will take it over for expenditures.
No spreadsheets for you tonight, which is unfortunate, but we'll still reference that. The last time I was here, we went through the trending model that I use that was developed out of some experience with the Department of Revenue, because we initially had a very basic way of carrying revenues year over year. We just assumed slight growth through everything and then level funded our expenses, and it was just a very rudimentary way of doing things. It worked because our revenue estimates were so conservative, right? And so every year the revenues would come in a little higher, expenses level funded. That's how you end up with some free cash at the end of the year, right? And then we had ARPA in there that helped with some one-time expenses. But now things are tightening a little bit, and we've evolved. You know, we have that trending model to give us a baseline of how each year is actually working out live. You know, each month we're reviewing each of the things that make up our local receipts, seeing where they're going, whether what we had projected last year is actually going to work out. Is there some growth, which is, we'll go over some increases that we've noticed this year. I'd like to give some credit to our new administration. We'll call it the top of the line. When you look at the budget, which is attached to the bottom of the town meeting warrant, if anybody ever gets down there and wants to get into the nitty gritty, that's where your levy limit is, with the 2.5% that we're allowed to add each year due to Prop 2.5. And then you add in new growth and then your excluded debt. Now that gives you that top line that I'm talking about. New growth has been kind of the buzzword for the last couple of years, because as it relates to the school project, we were looking at around town, where is this new growth coming from, right? And what can we actually project? As Colin mentioned, we've been collaborating with the assessor's office, the planner, Paul, who was there earlier, the building commissioner, and we really broke it down to, all right, so these are the projects we've been talking about for years. When are these actually going to come to fruition? Because we had been, for years, just kind of using a very generic number. If you look, there was probably 5 years where the projected new growth was the exact same number. And that's just not how, that's not how it actually works. It was just such a small item that we were kind of overlooking. So I just want to point out that we have been really trying to break down every piece of this budget to be more accurate, to kind of see if there is any room that we're missing, or is there anything, we're trying to avoid all the surprises that like Colin was just mentioning. You know, the towns around us are having some issues, and I can't speak for them, but I might have been able to foresee them coming. I would also like to shout out, I have 2 interns from the Collegiate Charter of Lowell. Shout out to So King and Kellyanne. They're working on that spreadsheet, you know, my pride and joy. So that keeps them busy during the day. Colin gives me interns by the parade, so. Moving on. So what makes up our revenue? This is that top line I was talking about, the levy limit. I give the whole number here, but what that actually is it's last year's levy limit multiplied by 2.5%, which is the most that we can increase the taxes, with the new growth included in here, as well as excluded debt. So I just put it as a total, but that's what factors in there. Local receipts, that I will break it out in the next page. Net state aid, that is our cherry sheet. So that's the aid minus the assessments. That's your net total. And then other available sources. This is mainly made up of our indirect costs that we get from the enterprise department. And so these are expenses for, you know, use of our building or use of our staff. So this is the enterprise that reimburses the town. So breaking that up, let me just, there's some graphs here for you. So the FY25 revenue sources, the left one there, this is just kind of giving a better visual of what is actually produces all our revenue. You can see that the levy limit, again, that's the 2.5% increase, the new growth, excluded debt. That's about 72% of our revenue. The local receipts coming in about 11%, net state aid 16%, and it doesn't ebb and flow by too much. And then those other available sources are just 1%. There was a request for the property tax breakdown. It's broken into 4 categories. This is the graph on the right: residential, commercial, industrial, and personal. For some reason, I just wrote only 2 of those repeatedly. So residential makes up about 89% of that, commercial is at 6%, and then we have industrial personal at 4% and 2% respectively. So this is a breakdown of those. On the left is a little redundant. I feel like I might have done this 3 sides in a row. On the right is local receipts. This is just what that 5 million is made up of. So this is your motor vehicle excise. Other excise is your meals and your hotels, canvas excise, penalties and interest, your fees, license permits. We would have had to eliminate this slide if you guys did not vote to increase the building permits, because as you can see, they are a pretty large driver. I will point out investments that we have up to 300,000. That has bounced back nicely, finally. There are some dark days there during COVID. That 300,000 is over a 50% increase than what we had budgeted last year. We've already exceeded our budget, so that's a nice increase there. Going back, so this is going to kind of dive a little deeper into what I mentioned prior. We're allowed to increase the real estate and personal property taxes by 2.5%. We estimate new growth being about 250,000 this year. I mentioned earlier that we had been using one number for about the past 5 years, and that was about 400,000. So this is it's lagging than what we were hoping for. This can change, but there is a deadline on this as well. We cannot include new growth outside of anything that is captured post 6/30. So everything has to be established before June 30th. It's because what you're doing is you're projecting your budget for the next fiscal year, right? So when we do the tax recap in November, all that's doing is recapping what we're doing now in development of the budget. You can't be, even though we'll know more, say, midsummer, a quarter in, we won't be able to adjust new growth. Well, there is an adjustment for that, where if we do get more growth than we expected. How that breaks down was a Toll Brothers project coming in about 160,000 realized this year. Affordable units on Sherburne Ave being about 70,000, and then 45 Middlesex being another 20. And now those aren't the total amounts we're going to get for those projects. That's just the amount that we're going to be able to realize for the next fiscal year. The meals taxes have increased significantly. You can see the new places in town like Epigram, Tavern Square, Domino's. Cannabis, we have Yellow House opening up. I think that we are pretty conservative with what we budgeted. Because we didn't want to say, hey, 2 buildings, double the revenue, right? Because they're going to, fight for each other for the revenue for a bit. But hopefully there'll be a pretty, any type of increase is a good increase, right?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
On that one, I'd like to kind of do a deeper dive or deeper understanding of what exactly that is. I mean, Yellow House, we've been expecting a second marijuana facility for about 3 years now, so I'm not really, I wouldn't want to count on them too much. And some of the trends, of the cannabis industry is to be more competition out there. Probably prices starting to go down a little bit. So I would really like to look at that number more in depth. And I'd like to see what the cannabis numbers also have been for excise and host impact fee over the past few years. I haven't really seen a chart for that. And then with that, just having a discussion and see if we should be 31%. It seems a little high to me, but, let me look at the numbers. All you're showing here also is the budget for the excise tax last year, not what we actually received. And I don't know exactly what it is we received. So if I had those numbers, it would help us out. Thank you.
I will be happy to put together a chart and an Excel sheet.
No pie charts.
Yeah, no, I think, and I had the same thing, because I think it's important for people to understand, this is the cannabis excise that's going into the general fund.
Right.
3/4 of the cannabis revenue is going directly into road stabilization. And I think, when people look at some of these things, they say, oh, gee, 275,000 was budgeted in there. We must be getting more than that. Well, yes, we are. So I do think it's important for us, when we show our revenues and we break those things out, I think we need to show, okay, that ultimately cannabis was, the net on this is the projection's gonna be that you'd have to get, 1.2 million, right, in total on that, or actually 1.6, right, because 3/4 of it's going to the road stabilization. What this is saying is that for fiscal '25, we're gonna budget 1.6 million in excise, and I think to your point, that's aggressive. Just because I think that, one, you're assuming that Yellow House will be up and running at that point for the full year. I think that there's no degradation in revenues at the existing Nature's Remedy location. One of the key principles of accounting is be conservative. So I think on the cannabis stuff, let's take a look at what the total is and see what that does relative to that. Keep going, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt. I know that one was definitely in there.
I'm the one that interrupted.
That's okay. I can apologize for you.
So as mentioned, and just responding to that, certainly, the estimate of 300,000, right, being 100,000 more is just a 1/3 increase, right? We weren't anywhere near doubling. That's not even increased by half, right? So,
Right.
But like you said, the unreliability of this project in general, it certainly makes for some variability, and we will dive deeper.
Yeah, and I would also, one of the things, sorry, You reminded me. So when you do a budget, right, and you're comparing budgets from '23 to '24, it may be that your budget was low. So at least on the cannabis side, you have an idea of where we are from the first 2 quarters. So it could be that your revenue projection is perfectly in line. We just don't have that because we don't have actuals here. We don't have any, you know, when we get closer to the year, you sit there and go, this is where we're trending. Don't hold me to it, but this is where we're trending, and it's easier for us to visualize that. So you may have access to some numbers that we don't. I assume you do.
Of course. Of course. So in the bottom line here, there is a negative to the indirect costs from the sewer. What happens is it's based off the budgeted amount. The math of it is the sewer's budget as a percentage of the general fund budget is how we come up with what portion they owe of, say, the town's expenses. Okay, so if they are, say, 1.5%, then they pay 1.5% of the town accountant, because they use that service, okay? Now, we had gone a couple years without an adjustment at the end to actuals, so the budget itself was a little overstated, because the sewer themselves, they are really conservative with a lot of their capital projects, what they consider their own capital projects. It's within their budget, so it really drastically lowers the percentage if they budget 600,000 and then don't spend it. That's 1/5 of their budget almost that they're not using. So we just true up with the sewer commission. I will say they did ask us if we wanted to smooth this out over a couple years. They did allow that option. This is just fixing everything right away, so it is a hit for this year, but the 100,000 will bounce back next year or something around that.
We did talk about state aid, and I mentioned this a little bit. The governor filed her initial fiscal '25 budget proposal last Monday. It included a decrease in our net state aid, which is a combination of the unrestricted general government and the education, about $68,000. However, the way the cherry sheet works is on top is your aid, and then they say, well, actually, we're also going to take this from you in the form of assessments. We're being assessed less in fiscal year '25. So even though we received a small decrease in her early proposal, important for me to reiterate, we are being assessed less. In fiscal '24, our assessment was close to 2.1 million, and in fiscal '25, it's that 1.9 number. So in total, our state aid technically increased because we're giving less of it back to the state. Now, what I will note is that this still has to go to the House and the Senate, and we likely won't know that final number till somewhere in late April. This, though, year over year, has been a general indicator of where we can find ourselves. So positive for now, and we'll just see what happens. And of course, at the tri-board meeting, we'll emphasize our need to the senator and representative that they keep this in mind.
And this is slightly better in the state aid in that we're not getting hit with a negative.
Correct.
But our costs have gone up in many of these areas, so, it's great if you're sitting at home and you didn't get a pay raise, but inflation kicked in on you, you ended up losing out. So I do think we are gonna have to advocate for some of these things, certainly depending upon where.
So, Mr. Chair, I mean, we've had the senator and the representative in here multiple years, and every year we show the chart that Tyngsborough basically is getting the same as they did 10 years ago, roughly. And every year we talk about it, every year we say, hopefully you could fix this, and every year we see the cherry sheet and what comes back, and it's just about the same. But we will advocate again when they come here, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, I do think that in my limited time, in the last couple, we have done that, and there has been slight improvements. Certainly hasn't been to the level that we had hoped, but I know like last year, we were taking a big hit, and it was quite a bit less last year, and through the various House and Senate proposals in the final budget, it wasn't as the gap wasn't as bad as what it was. So I think it's important for us to clearly articulate that and make sure that we keep on that.
Well, Mr. Chair, we'll keep on it, and we see very consistently, you know, the governor comes out with something. Of course, the House and Senate wants to add a little bit more, right, make it look like they're doing more for, but in the end, the net is that every year we get just about the same. Governor Healy talks about the really small communities and giving them extra money, but we're not in a really small community, we're not in a really small community, we're just in a small community. So we're still not getting any extra money, we're just pretty much the same, you know, every year. And that's what we have to budget for, because we realize that's what's happened for the past 10 years.
Absolutely.
All right, and now we're gonna look at the stabilization balances. These are our reserves. It's been a focus of the town over the last couple of years to really, the standard is having your general fund somewhere around 7%, or your general stabilization being 7% of your total budget, and then all your stabilization, so all your reserves to be somewhere around the 10% mark. If you are looking at the presentation with the red numbers in there, that is just because we kind of have free cash pending, if you will, and so those amounts would have been put into those buckets, but they are not included currently. So looking at the balances as of, these are June 30th, 23, the general stabilization at 3 million, 3.3 million would be about 7%, so we're right on the cusp there. I can tell you that in 2019, which is 5 years ago, it was $1.3 million less. So there's been a pretty significant focus. You can see with the chart, the reason I did this type of chart, just because when you look at the stabilization and the balances, it kind of looks like it's, we all have some buckets that we're working with and that are active, but what's really happening is we're funding the general fund pretty adamantly. The capital assets is only increased by interest pretty much for 5 years. We are going to start funding that a little bit, but the billboard, I believe that money was earmarked initially, and it's kind of just hung out in there. The revenue now goes directly to the general fund. Special ed stabilization is used to supplement the school's budget. We don't use the debt stabilization. Maybe we should consider that depending how free cash works out this year. The road maintenance is that number looks large, $1.1 million, but as the chair said, this is where 75% of the marijuana excise money is going. I can tell you that the town engineer has got this money pretty much spent. His roads program is very comprehensive. And so while this in totality gives a percentage comparative to our budget, this stabilization itself is used pretty much throughout the year. So these funds most of the other stabilization funds are going to stay in here until we try to use them. Like the capital hasn't been used for at least 5 years. Nothing's been used out of the general stabilization. These are supposed to be really dire needs. Our ratings agencies, they're kind of the ones that showed us that the 7 and 10% rules, and they really don't want to hear that you had to dip in here, because that kind of means you're kind of, dipping into the piggy bank a little bit.
I wanted to highlight what are one-time revenues grants that we receive. Our staff are extremely diligent, not just in seeking out, but we've been very successful in actually getting grants to fund not just large projects, but also to offset costs on projects that we were already going to do where possible. And really, I think a great example of how we leverage multiple funding sources at your last meeting when the town engineer presented the roads program and the different buckets, the mix of grants, stabilization money, state aid, and the general fund. And so that's something that our staff kind of do on their own. Many communities have grant staff. We don't. It's just something that all of our staff do. And so I wanted to highlight a few. In fiscal '24, we've been tremendously successful. So far, we've received more than $3.9 million in grants. A small sampling, obviously the $2 million Mass Works grant, which is funding some pretty substantial private-public improvements on Kendall Road. Our Board of Health is on year 3 of this regional public health grant, which has really expanded their reach and what we're able to offer. They got $300,000 at the start of the year, and we were just notified a couple weeks ago about an amendment for an additional $100,000. The Sewer Commission does tremendously well seeking out federal funds specifically. I can't say this with 100% certainty, but I'm fairly certain most of the design on all of our phases, the expansions, have been funded at least in part by some of these congressional earmarks, including this $869,000 one. We've talked in the past about the $100,000 economic development earmark. Our fire department got a pretty substantial SAFER grant, which helps with a multitude of things. A lot of that deals with community outreach and training. They do a lot at our Council on Aging and in the schools. That's almost $300,000. And then we also apply for the smaller ones because we're not too good for any amount of money. The planning department, for instance, has a $15,000 technical assistance grant. They've received more than this. All of our MBTA planning work, the MBTA Communities Act, has been done with grant money and services that were offered by the state. That we haven't leveraged any operating funds, except for Eric's salary, of course. And then the police department is utilizing $26,000 in a municipal road safety grant for various safety things. That's funding overtime for saturation patrols. It's funding speed sign equipment. So we apply for grants all the time. It's something staff know to do. And it really helps us close the gap where that's necessary, but also shift the burden from the operating budget to state resources. So this is a small sampling. We've received quite a bit more and we'll continue to receive more. Obviously, you can't budget for these because they're unknowns, but I'm proud of the work that we do on that front. Now, the meat of the presentation is the expenditures. This is a summary of what we're looking at so far, broken down to 3 different buckets. The education category includes the Tyngsborough Public School System and the Greater Lowell Tech Assessment, because those are the 2 biggest education items. General government is everything except for public safety and education, and public safety is police, fire, animal control, and emergency management. The total increase is $1.76 million, or 3.7% over the last fiscal year. And we'll talk about assumptions in the next slide, but that education one is based on a series of assumptions. We don't know where that number is actually going to land. But this is just a quick presentation of where we were in fiscal '24 in those 3 buckets and where I think we're going to land in fiscal '25. The assumptions that we were talking about, this board and the school committee have an agreement that they'll keep their budget increase at 2.7%. That's tied to this board agreeing to fund $1 million of new growth to offset the debt for the new middle school beginning in fiscal '26. I've talked to Dr. Flanagan numerous times. We have some meetings set up in February. The school department is well aware of that 2.7% limitation. And so the number that I've included, although if you look in the budget sheet that's in your packet, I just put it all under the expense category for now. How that breaks down, we'll find out, is 2.7%. In fiscal '24, we experienced a relatively large increase in enrollment at Greater Lowell. So assuming a worst case scenario, so there were no surprises down the road, to calculate that as an early number, I just took the fiscal '24 number and added the same % increase we saw last year. So if we found ourselves in that same worst case scenario, that's what the number would be. Typically, Greater Lowell will give us some idea of their assessment early in February. They're scheduled to come to one of your March meetings to present their budget. But for now, we just use that so that we had a number to present. A big assumption is on labor. As we've talked about before, 6 of the 7 collective bargaining agreements under this office's jurisdiction expire this year. We're in the process of negotiating them, but all of them remain unsettled today. So in preparing this budget, we assumed a flat 2.5% increase. So as we settle those contracts, we'll make updates to the budget, but that's where we are. The biggest assumption that we made, and one area where I'm hopeful we've been too concerned, is a 10% increase in health insurance. Health insurance is a huge driver in our budget. It goes up dramatically every year. We'll talk a little bit about it in a future slide. But Maya tells us every single year to budget for 10%. We met with them in October. That was the message. We did get some glimmer of hope a few weeks ago. They said that the average increase for members in the Maya Trust was closer to 7%. So we're hopeful. We'll know more in the next couple of weeks. We also proactively, Bridget, our HR benefits coordinator, has set up a meeting with the union representatives that make up our insurance advisory committee. Maya is going to come out in February to propose a couple slight plan changes, which may, for instance, increase the deductibles on certain things, but will result in a net savings both for what the employee pays and for what the town pays. So we're looking at all fronts on that, but obviously we're hopeful that that 10% number will come dramatically down. And, you know, I think because of that number is so high, even if we came down 2 percentage points, that's a substantial savings. So those are the assumptions that we're making today. This first slide, when we ask departments to put their budgets together, like we mentioned, we tell them to put their budgets together maintaining level service, and any new positions don't include in your budget request, send us a proposal on the outside. The items on this page are items that made it into the budget proposal, whether because the department thought that that was maintaining level service or because they thought that that would enhance their services. These are items that I'm not recommending. The first is the social media archiving. While it's true that we have a substantial number of social media accounts, and while a strict interpretation of the public records law is that anything we create is a public record, the public record law also says that you're only responsible for things that are in your possession. In the case of social media, those items are actually in the possession of Facebook and Twitter. And so while by no means do we have any intention of just deleting or getting rid of any of our accounts, to me, paying an outside company to duplicate what we were already hosting on a different computer, a different server, wasn't reasonable. We will spend the next few months looking at these social media accounts. Many of them haven't been used in years. And I think once we know for certain which accounts we're looking to get rid of, and once we've gotten some additional guidance from the Secretary of State's office as it relates to how social media plays into the public records law, then we can look at some of these things. And if we get to a point where we have to spend, say, $6,000, our operating budget between my office and the IT department can cover it. So to me, it wasn't worth the additional expense. A big item that I have not included in my current recommended budget is the 24/7 IT support that the police department and IT department were requesting for the PD. It's $35,000 a year. It relies on a contract with an outside vendor. My thinking of not including it is twofold. One, you'll see in a future slide, I am recommending that we make the part-time support specialist full-time, which will alleviate some of that. Additionally, I think before we make the leap to spending $35,000 a year, we have to have a real plan about what do we need in-house support for versus what support is already available through the critical programs that the police department uses, whether it's through their CAD, the dispatch system. To me, spending $35,000, and I don't know this for a fact, if that's paying someone to be a conduit between the end user at the police department and the program support we're already paying for with these softwares, to me, that's something that I wasn't comfortable with, and I would like at least a year under our belt with 2 full-time employees, if that's where we go, to know exactly what the impact is. So that was a big chunk. It showed up in both departments' budgets, so I've put it as a request for both.
And Mr. Chair, so we don't have this service today.
Correct.
Our current IT department supports this. So just so everybody knows, all Colin's proposing is to do it the same way we're doing it today and not adding this extra expense.
Correct.
Okay.
This one's not, the board's not gonna like me for this one. The cyber incident response plan, I'm not recommending we fund. Plainly put, between the grants that we've already applied for and are eligible for, and the additional resources that Roni connected us with at the state, I am very confident that we will be able to get a state grant to fund all of this. So it's not something that I think we need to bear the responsibility for. Again, if we get halfway through fiscal '25 and we were not able to find it, we are generally able to find a way for us to fund it in the current operating budget. So I'm not detracting from its importance, but I do think that we would be very successful. The state is essentially forcing these resources down municipalities' throats right now, so I'm confident in our abilities on that one. The police department in their budget this year, one of the things that we did probably 5 or 6 years ago is we took the police department's cruisers, put them on a lease-based system. It's really a lease-to-own system that breaks out the payments. And we started putting it into the operating budget. That eliminated them needing to go to capital every year to replace the cruisers. Typically, we fund 2 to 3, depending on the year, lease payments. Last year, I believe we funded 2 because we were already in those lease payments. The budget that the chief presented this year included 4 lease payments, 2 that are existing and 2 new ones. In looking at their fleet, we do a very good job managing the fleet. And while certainly Deputy Chief Woods would disagree with me on this point, I think that we're at a point where even adding just that 1 additional cruiser lease, so their new budget would be the 2 existing and 1 new one, will go a long way to continue to support the fleet. For me, I had a hard time recommending a $30,000 expense for a second new vehicle in the same year, for instance, where we're not able to fund a new fire truck or a new highway truck. We've done a really good job. I think our budget gives the police department the flexibility to manage those leases without going to capital, and so this was balancing a need with how we've operated with other departments. Again, we're not cutting a vehicle from their budget. It's just we're not going to grant that second new one in fiscal '25 in my proposal.
So, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
So this is, I think, the 3rd year as you said, we have it in our operational budget, and then we're getting more and more requests for additional leases beyond that. I would just like to kind of see the details behind this to see if we need to update our operational budget to start including more, or get an understanding of why this keeps coming up year after year. I never saw this the first 3 years I was here, but the last 3 years, it seems every year, we're getting more and more requests for new leases beyond what is already in our operating budget, which is a couple. So can I just get more details on that? You know me with capital asset when it comes to vehicles.
Yes.
I just like to see the details.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And on that one, I'm just looking at their departmental budget. Their departmental budget has an increase of 6.35%.
In fiscal '24, we only funded the 2 current leases. In my fiscal '25 budget, I am including those 2 plus 1 new one.
Right, but I'm just saying, so overall, it's not like, there's still an increase in the police budget of 6.35%.
Oh, correct.
So
Correct.
I was just looking at some of the numbers, because I'm sitting there going, ooh, are we level funding, and
Right.
what are we doing? It's not like we're level funding this, there's an increase in there.
Right.
Okay.
And I will note that this board has been very gracious with the police department. I think at least twice we've authorized the use of ARPA funds for one-time purchases of police cruisers. So this is something the board has made a priority. If we lived in a perfect world, perhaps 2 new ones in fiscal '25 would be great. But I've spoken to the chief, and like I said, while Deputy Woods would certainly disagree with me, I think there will be no hindrance on their operations by making that cut. And then the last one that appears to be a cut but really isn't a cut is a part-time position in the treasurer collector's office. This is, I think, 19 hours a week that was funded in fiscal '23. We had it funded in fiscal '24 but haven't filled the position. Instead, we used the savings from not filling that position to help kind of assess the organization in the treasurer's office. We're still in that process. What I can say is early on, the operations right now are running very smoothly. Having worked in that office, I kind of have an idea of how things work, and so we're going a whole fiscal year without the position. My recommendation is that we don't necessarily need it. We're still looking at the roles and seeing how we can make sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to, and all the staff in there have been super receptive to our assessment of that. But I think what's become clear is this additional position perhaps was not actually necessary. And again, it looks like a cut because it was included in the budget request because it was there in fiscal '24, but the position hasn't been filled since fiscal '23. And again, I mentioned that we asked departments not to include new positions in their actual budget request to not messy things up, but instead to send us a memo highlighting it. So here you have one that has been a repeat request and 2 new ones. So from the police department, they're once again seeking about $24,000 for a part-time records clerk. This is due largely in part to the substantial increase in public records requests that are coming in to the police department. I know it takes up a substantial amount of time in Deputy Chief Woods' day. We've made it this far without it. My concern on adding it this year is that fiscals '26 and '27, when we start to realize the need to fund $1 million from new growth to the middle school, those will be very tough years. And if we add this liability this year, are we going to be looking at having to just cut it again in fiscal '26? So I appreciate the work that comes out of it, that comes out of the records request, and perhaps there are ways that we can look at utilizing what we currently have and maybe some new software to help, but I don't think the town at this time can support a new position. The police department has also submitted a request for a new police officer. They're currently at 27 sworn officers. One officer is on military deployment until November, so they're technically operating right now with 26. I'm not recommending it this year simply because by the time we hire somebody and get them working solo shifts, we're beyond the period where that 27th sworn officer will be back in Tyngsborough working. The chief, obviously in a perfect world, would like to have more than 27, but has acknowledged that 27 is the number we need to operate. And so for the next several months, operating at 26 may result in some additional overtime for some officers, but it's certainly not impacting our ability to respond to calls, to fill shifts. And so, again, it would be a new liability in fiscal '26 that I would worry about with the uncertainty. And I will note, departments, just because you see these requests here doesn't necessarily mean that a department is saying they can't operate without it. We have a tradition of departments submitting the request so that once we can afford it, there's a documented history of them seeking that position. And in that light, the fire department is requesting a full-time fire inspector. This is work that's currently covered by Assistant Chief Sands. We do have one firefighter who has the certification necessary to assist, and so there may be some things we can do with the union, whether it's a stipend if he helps out in Pat's place, but certainly adding a $70,000 position this fiscal year was not feasible. And I've talked to both chiefs. They both know that these aren't included in the requests, so this isn't a surprise for them. Any questions on those 3 new positions?
Nope.
Excellent. The fund slide, what I am recommending that we fund that's new in fiscal '25, $24,000 for administrative support for the fire department. This was funded in fiscal '23. I don't know how much it was talked about, but I have double checked and it was in there. The fire department is one of our larger departments. It doesn't have any administrative support. It's just the chief and the assistant chief. In '24, it was in Matt's original proposed budget, and I think as we got close, once all these numbers ironed out, there were several areas we had to cut, and this was one of them. Again, it's the only department that doesn't have administrative support. We have some departments with 3 staff that have an administrative support, so it seems like the right thing to do. It doesn't have any additional fringe benefits for us, so we're not looking at additional health insurance costs. Typically, they've filled this by giving additional hours to firefighters that are already on our payroll. So there's a much less of a risk than if we went out and, say, hired a new person. I am recommending that we stay on track with our sort of informal commitment to increase the general fund contribution in road improvements by $50,000. I believe it was the intent of the board last budget to increase it by $50,000, but again, when we got to the final budget, that was one area that was easy to reduce, so we stayed level funded in fiscal '24. This would increase us for the first time in 2 years, which, given the need of our roads and the presentation, I think makes sense, the presentation that Jake made. I'm recommending a $10,000 increase in the highway department to make their part-time administrative assistant full-time. This does 2 things. We have shifted a lot of the payroll responsibility, which alleviated some of the workload in our treasurer's office to this position, but also with the any day approval of the Department of Public Works Act, it was always our intention to have a full-time administrative support person over there that could help multiple departments within the DPW, and $10,000 is a nominal increase. The employee that's in the position is already benefit eligible, so again, we're not looking at additional costs beyond that 10. And then finally, I am recommending that we go ahead and increase the support specialist position from part-time to full-time, and I want to commend Tom and Roni for coming up with a way where the increase on the operating budget is minimal. It's about $14,000. The balance of $10,000 would be offset by the PEG fund, and that employee will be cross-trained to help with night meetings, to help troubleshoot on the media side. My understanding is our existing support specialist has some experience in that category. This is, to me, a no-brainer. Tom talked about the need for us to increase the work that we're doing and the cost savings that could come with it. So I think it's important that we include it.
Mr. Chair, and one of the goals will be to implement a lot of those efficiencies to reduce our overall expenses, which should reduce that number.
Correct.
In a net world, right? So if we can reduce the number of workstations, the software, and everything else, we can reduce that number significantly.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the new items? I just wanted to, for folks that at home that are watching this presentation, I want to talk about some of the big drivers in the budget and why why it goes up so much. Our first area is the trash and recycling contract. In fiscal '25, we're looking at a 5.7% increase. That represents our hauling contract and our disposal contract with Covanta. We're in the final year. Fiscal '25 will be the final optional extension we have with Republic. So starting in the summer, fall, I would expect that we begin procuring a new contract, whether that be with Republic or with somebody else. And so there may be some avenues for us to do some cost savings on that front. The fire department holiday pay is a big driver here. When we were sitting with them to do their budget, we realized that in the last at least 2, probably 3 years, the way that they were budgeting for their holiday pay was completely inaccurate. We were blowing through that every single year. We're trending in fiscal '24 to double what we budgeted. So this looks like a dramatic increase, but I want to, as a disclaimer, nobody is making any more money because of this. They're the only contract actually that is settled, so we know what their fiscal '25 rate increases will be. This is just preventing us from having to, in May of next year, do a year-end transfer to cover it. And the reason their holiday pay is different is because here at Town Hall, when we have a holiday, we all just collect our regular salary, but nobody's in the building. In fire and police, we have to pay the holiday pay and pay for somebody to be in the station because you can't close just because it's a holiday. You'll see when we talk about the ambulance enterprise fund, that's a similar thing. They split their expenses between the two, so they saw a similar problem.
So, Colin, just a question, 102% sounds like a big percentage increase, but do you feel for the dollar amount what that represents?
I think it's like 65 grand.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Another area where where we're seeing a big increase is the overtime in the fire department. Last year, the proposed budget from the fire department would have corrected a 2-year tradition of them overspending overtime and us having to do a year-end transfer. At the last minute, that was an area that was cut as well. Unfortunately, on the management side, there's very little you can do to avoid overtime. In the highway side, we can wait a little longer to go out and sand. We can wait a little longer to plow. On the fire department side, if we send our whole on-duty crew out to a fire and we have to call in the other crew early, we have to pay overtime. So if we didn't put in the budget now, in May of '25, we would just be looking at having to do a year-end transfer as well. We talked about health insurance. Software costs in the IT budget, it looks a little less dramatic if you look at his budget, but because he experienced some cost savings elsewhere. But our major permitting software is Viewpoint. It's used by all of our inspectional services department. The recreation department uses it for their building. It is changing the way that it bills us. It was previously billing us per record, which was prohibitive for us because we have a host of licenses we'd like to put on there, including your licenses, but we were paying per record. They are now doing unlimited records, which is advantageous to us. However, it is resulting in a pretty substantial increase. That's one of the drivers. A lot of the software that we're using, mobile software for some of our departments like police and fire, which is included in the IT budget, is increasing. So 35% of the increase in the IT budget is due to software that we're contractually obligated to pay. And then we talked about the police department's additional cruiser as well.
Yeah, and I can tell you software costs have gone through the roof. 35 is pretty high. I've been seeing 25 recently. I mean, a lot of these are contracted through the state, so they're already negotiated, but 25 is painful. 35 is really painful.
The one good thing I will say about the Viewpoint change, it really got us thinking about other softwares that we're using and how we can eliminate the use. And so there's one that we had been using. I think Matt brought it on probably a year and a half ago, and that's a $15,000 a year payment that we were hoping to use the software to do your licensing. Since it's no longer cost prohibitive to do it on Munis and we don't have a legal binding contract, we'll save 15 grand because we're not going to stick with the contract that we had for what your licensing would have been. And we're going to be able to utilize a lot of the new features on Civic Plus will help us also revisit what existing software we're using once that comes online. One thing I also wanted to just point out, not just for the board's awareness, because I'm sure the board is aware, but for folks at home, is that you're probably wondering, well, the school department budget is tied to 2.7%, but you're recommending a general fund increase of 3.7%. The 10% that we're planning for health insurance is the health insurance for town employees and school employees. So even though the school department has its own budget, those costs are borne by the operating budget. And so I just wanted to show that if you look at our active employees, which is on the right side, the bill we get for health insurance, 27% of that is for town employees. The remaining 73% is for the school department. So it looks skewed that our budget is going up 3.7%, but we have the biggest driver, health insurance. The retiree breakdown is much more close to even, about 43% on the town side and 56% on the school department side. But again, health insurance year over year remains one of our biggest budget drivers, and we don't currently have a mechanism that bills back the school department's budget. So that's why you're seeing that increase.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this, but I think it's gonna be important for us to look, and David, you may be able to help with this. I assume it's gonna end up in your desk anyway, but I really would like to know, like, the total expenditures or the breakdown by department, right? So we've got health insurance, we got pension, we got all these things that are lumped in, everybody is all together, and it's not broken out by department. I'd like to understand, pie chart or not, but understand what my total costs are by department. So I can sit there and say, look, I'm spending X percentage for the schools, Y for public safety, this for town administration, this for DPW, and that should include the debt service, the health insurance, pension, everything. And then, if we wanted to look at what those numbers were by department, we could look at that. But I'm just trying to get a feel for, like, the total cost to sit there and say, all right, where are we? Because the way I look at it is, then the next question is, all right, how do we compare with everybody else? Are we in a situation where we're light in what we spend on public safety versus what other towns are spending? Just so we can get some comparatives on that to understand, where we are, because our budget has traditionally been made up of whatever we did 20 years ago, and we just keep moving it forward. At some point, we need to kind of reset and look at it and say, does this make sense? Is this where those things are going? Because we've got a lot of these competing things between schools and roads, and they're all important. They're all critical for what we need, and that's what everybody wants. But I don't know where those percentages are to see where we are compared to other people and whether we should be investing more here or less there or whatever it is.
Mr. Chair, I know you love pie charts, and every time you say pie charts, I seem to laugh. I don't know why.
I like pie.
But it is important to look at all the departments. We have looked at them, but I think, to keep looking at them is very important, especially compared to other similar communities.
Sorry,
No, that's not
I had to get on that road, because I look at it and say, all right, when I see these things, where is it for everything else, right? Because that's the health insurance, and that's a big chunk, but we need to look at it across everything.
All right, leaving the general fund, moving on to the three enterprise funds. First up is the sewer enterprise fund, which, as this board knows, is set by the sewer commission. I won't spend too much time on this slide. Their FY25 request is $3.7 million. No real big surprises in the increase. They're carrying a healthy contingency for capital projects. Some of that, of course, includes their contributions on the new DPW building, which they've been carrying for some time. And then they always provide a breakdown of their revenue sources, which is on the bottom part of the slide. The ambulance enterprise fund, in fiscal '24, their total budget was $628,000, and in fiscal '25, it's $671,000. Again, a big chunk of that increase is due not just to contractual increases, the final year of that firefighter contract, but also the correction in holiday pay. And again, they have a calculation. The ambulance enterprise fund funds a certain percentage of their employees. They all kind of run between the both of them. On a revenue side, I do want to note that the ambulance enterprise fund is doing well. They closed fiscal '23 with about $70,000 in retained earnings, which allowed them to fund the final portion of their new ambulance, which was partially funded by capital. The rest was put on them. They didn't have to do any borrowing, and they didn't have to split the payments up over a few years. They paid it all off because they had that surplus of retained earnings. So they're doing well, they're billing well this year, and I can ask the chief to send us a more updated billing report, but no new surprises in the ambulance enterprise fund. And then the final enterprise fund is the PEG Enterprise Fund. In fiscal '24, their budget was $158,000, and in fiscal '25, it's $185,000. That includes a much needed capital or attended capital expenditure from the PEG fund of about 40 grand, which would fund installation of 2 additional video monitors in this room and upgrade cameras, switches, and the production suite. A couple other things, including at Old Town Hall, which has meeting recording capability. So that's one of the bigger budget drivers. Also, as I mentioned previously, they've agreed to cover $10,000 worth of the IT support specialist salary. I think that does it for my presentation.
All right, questions? I probably should have said, geez, should we hold off questions or should we ask them at the time? It's hard to know. So I'm sure there's questions, and I will open it up to the board. Did you want to go first this time?
Look at that. You get to go in reverse order. Okay. So, obviously, there's a lot here, and we're going to go over it a few more times.
Absolutely.
So, I really don't want to get into the very nitty-gritty of the details. But what I would like, David, hopefully if it's okay with you, this little chart here to help me understand better where we're going. So, I see that we have, like, the budget for each year, right? But would you mind just adding in a column, right? So, like, starting at 2021 budget, and then what actually, budget, what actually, and then obviously to this year, budget, where we are thus far. And then in the last % increase, right, for 2025 projection, if there's anything that stands out, right, can we just put in the notes right there, even if it's just a bullet point, what you believe, why this is so off trend, right? Much higher and much lower. That way I can just kind of go down the sheet, right? Budget, did we hit our target, yes or no? Budget, did we hit our target, yes or no? So that I can really compare in one row instead of like flipping through the presentation.
Yep, I believe that data was just kind of compacted for you a little bit. If you look at the town meeting warrant that
Yeah.
we provide, that has that if you stretch out that document we can share with you, that has the 3 columns you're talking about, that shows budget, actual, recommended, and increases. So we have the data available for
All
you.
the way
That
back
was,
to
that,
20.
yeah,
Yeah, that would
to
be.
like 2012, even, sorry to
I
interrupt.
do not need back to 2012. I promise you, I will not look that far back. But definitely starting probably around 2021, just so that I can, for my own personal, review it and make sure that we can have any discussions beforehand or after to clarify. And that would be very helpful to me.
Sure.
Thank you very much. And then, I'm assuming that what we went through with you, Colin, a little bit further, these are just what will go in the notes, right?
Yes.
Perfect. I'm done. It was great.
Thank you.
That will allow me to figure it out moving forward, because I know we're still at a high level.
Mr. Cohen?
My other question is just the next meeting, we don't need to do it now, is other department revenue, it went down 11%. Just get a little more detail on that, because I kind of want to understand, is that a one-time thing, or what went down? Is there any way we could recover that? Is it going to go down further next year? It'll help me do that. And then other available sources also went down 23%. So just a little bit more detail on that, so we can get an understanding for this year, and then, forecast it for next year, which is going to be very important, as Colin said. We have $1 million the operating budget next year, which we talk about constantly over the past year, and we're still looking good, but, all those little things help us get an understanding of next year's budget also. Because after we finalize this one, then we're going to want the 5-year budget, of course. But finish this one first.
Of course, the quick and easy on the other available sources is your, the decrease on the indirect from the sewer.
On the what?
The sewer correction, that's
Oh,
the
okay.
minus that.
So that's a
107.
one-time cost.
Yep.
That's
So-
kind of key.
I don't want to be quoted here, we're not gonna get the 90 back next year, we're just going to adjust the actuals on a more yearly basis, and so that there will be a correction on the budgeted amount, but This year was a couple years added there, so I just want to put that.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Schneider?
And same thing, without belaboring a lot of detailed questions, the two that just stuck out to me that I just would look for an explanation is why do penalties and interest increase by as much by, 31%, and why did fees go down by 25%? Don't need an answer necessarily right now, but those are just the ones that kind of.
So explanations for things that have like a, let's say a 20%.
Yeah,
Or
20 or
more.
30%.
Just, just some sort of explanation as to why on some of those.
Right.
And I think having the actuals sits there and says, okay, what is it based on? Okay. Yeah, and like one of the small, I don't know whether it's a typo or not, but like library revenue went from 2,000 to 20,000. My guess is that's a typo. And that,
Whoops.
so you need to find another $18,000
Don't-
on the
they
revenue
just
side.
left. They just left.
The other, and I think we alluded to it when we talked about cannabis and being conservative on that. While it's awesome that that our investments, our earnings on investments was up quite a bit. I think we're dealing in a time where interest rates are probably as high as you're going to get on those investments. And I think that there's going to be a correction. I think that we need to be conservative in how we look at those. I don't know what rates we're using, but I think that's something that we'd want to understand, just because that's a big, one of those bigger numbers. I think it's, from the stabilization account, so we don't have debt stabilization, we do have capital stabilization. Can you explain to me what is debt stabilization versus capital stabilization? Because my understanding, the reason we were pushing on the capital stabilization and trying to build that up was so that we wouldn't have to borrow and take on debt for some of these high dollar capital items. And, I mean, I assume that debt stabilization might be for the really big rainy day fund if we were to be awesome about stuff and say, you know what, I'm gonna have a school in 20 years, I might wanna start saving. Is that what debt stabilization is?
I mean, both were created before I was here, right? And so, yes, if we're really trying to break down what the difference is between those two, it's probably just the purpose that was stated when they were created, right? They may be a little redundant in the idea, right? Because capital stabilization could certainly help with capital debt, right? But generally speaking, when we're talking about capital projects, I guess there are $300,000 capital projects, maybe. So to your point, maybe you're just saying capital is for the smaller one-time things and debt's for the larger one, but I don't know why they were specifically created separate. I don't see any reason why they couldn't be in the same fund, because it's.
That's kind of where I was going, because the heart, and Colin, you may have another thought on this one, so.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also was not here when they were created. I think, and one of the things that we'll probably talk to you at a future meeting about is when we think about this bigger picture, the big debt that's coming online with the middle school, it would be really great if over the last 10 years we had thought about that and the debt stabilization fund was higher, because even if, I painted a somewhat rosy picture for fiscal 25. I have concerns about 26 and 27, but even if we get to fiscal 28 and we've managed our obligation, we may find ourselves 5 or 6, remember this is a 30-year loan, we may find ourselves 5 or 6 years from now not being in such a positive position. And it would be nice if we could tap into a debt stabilization fund. And so one thing that we may consider, and I think we'll probably have a proposal, is looking at what existing revenue sources can we dedicate while times are good to the debt stabilization, so we have something to offset future impacts on the town's operating budget.
And that's kind of where I was going, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we looked at how we would fund some of this debt service out of the, the $1 million, that there was gonna be, particularly as you ramp up, right? As you ramp up, you gotta pay, you don't have all the growth that's there. So there were some areas where we might need to tap into some of those things. And I think we missed the boat, years ago when we started down this process that we should have been. But I'm thinking that this year, I know There was 200,000 that we didn't get in from free cash in last year's budget that is going in there into capital stabilization. I think we need to start building up our stabilization accounts regardless. I think we should have kind of a rainy day fund for some of those types of things to help deal with the debt service and all of that, so that we're not, it's hard if you're gonna get hit with $1 million all in one year, and we wanted to ramp up, and we gave ourselves some time. Maybe the economy and our growth didn't allow us to get to that. So if we can put some money in there now to maybe bridge a year when we, it's not as much as we need, I think we need to look at that.
Absolutely.
I thought she was trying to get your attention. She was,
Oh, that's okay.
She has different
You
ideas
never
on the
know
debt
with this crew what we're
stabilization
laughing
fund,
about.
actually.
Yeah, so that's it. I mean, I think that there was a lot of items that we covered in here, and I think for the next one, I think you have I hope you have a good idea of kind of the direction that we want to go and the type of information that we need.
100%. I mean, it's early January, right? And we're with all the trend data, I mean, I can tell you the fees, that there's some timing on those fees. I can use a model to say, hey, we're all right, with, there's a little ebb and flow that I try to alleviate, but I know that with the billings that we're about to do out of the treasurer's office, that some of those fees are about to increase. I can tell you 3 line items that equaled almost $90,000 last year that are $0 right now. I can see that, but it's almost too early to kind of be like, well, it looks like we're not getting that. Or, I hear you. More detail, the better. That's right up my alley. We just try to make it a little more digestible sometimes, and I'm happy to flood you with details.
Great. Any other items relative to this?
Good
Excellent.
first pass.
Yeah,
Thank you
it's
very
great.
much.
It's great. I appreciate all the work that's been done up to this point. It will help as we go through the next steps, so that, we're tweaking things versus trying to dig down deeper, so thanks. All right, next item. Hang on. We got, open the annual town meeting warrant. There we go.
Very exciting. I'm asking the select board to vote this evening to formally open the 2024 annual town meeting warrant. As a reminder, town meeting will be on May 7th, 2024, 7 p.m. at the elementary school. The deadline to submit citizen petitions to the town clerk is March 28th, and I expect to ask the select board to post the annual town meeting and special town meeting warrant at its meeting on April 22nd. We've let department heads know what the deadline is to get warrants in, articles in for your consideration. But the first step in the town meeting season is for you all to formally open the warrant.
Great. Questions? I mean, I think I know of a handful of zoning ones that we're talking about, but I don't know if there's, my guess is it's a lot of the normal stuff that's there. So we'll see. All right, I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board open the 2024 annual and special town meeting warrant.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, that carries 4-0-0. Okay. Bicentennial Field, additional funding request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As the board is aware, at the recommendation of Capital Asset last year, it authorized $220,000 for the irrigation project at Bicentennial Field. That followed a previous allotment of $30,000 for the design of the project. The intent was to reduce the town's reliance on municipal water and instead draw water from a neighboring brook, Bridge Meadow Brook, to water the fields. That would alleviate the roughly $50,000 a year that we're spending watering the fields. The project budget was based on estimates put together by our consultant, irrigation consultants, in November of 2022, which included a $25,000 contingency, so a healthy contingency at the time. The total estimated construction cost was $217,000. I included in your packet the original cost estimates that we received from them. 1 year later, only 1 year, we put the project out to bid in November of 2023 and held a bid walk on site where interested bidders were able to ask questions and visualize the scope. Bids were due on November 22nd, 2023, and we received only 2 bids. A copy of the bid tab is also included in your packet. The lowest bid was $732,000, and the second one was $843,000, so Our low bid was certainly not an outlier. This represented obviously a dramatic increase in the budget cost, nearly 4 times our estimate, well beyond cost escalation in a 12-month period, well beyond. We rejected the bids naturally and were informed by both vendors that there were options for us to value engineer out some of what they called nice to haves. And so with that in mind, we met with our design consultant multiple times and said, we don't want to change the intent of the project. We don't want to make it so that what we install won't last as long, but the town can assume some level of the maintenance responsibility if we have to value engineer some components out. So after several meetings, we received a list of value engineering items, which brings the project cost closer to $500,000 based on their estimates. You know, I still have issues with how we can be at this point less than a full, 1 year after they did the original cost estimates. I've contemplated going to school to design irrigation projects, so I can see exactly what the messes are. But that said, I've talked to both of the vendors that bid on the project originally. And while it's tough to say within the realm of public procurement laws and not being able to give them too much information, looking at the list of items that we value engineered out, both vendors have indicated that A, the integrity of the project is the same. We're still complying with the very limited order of conditions the Conservation Commission gave us. It will deliver what we're looking for. One of the big items is that we've changed the structure of the pump so that in the winter or in the late fall, we'd have to take it out of the water. Previously, it was built in this mansion of a device that would allow it to stay there in the winter. We've eliminated that, and we'll just have to reinstall it in the spring. I've talked to the school's facility folks. I've talked to the highway guys. All of them are comfortable doing that. It's a simple task. So, to get from the $220 that the board originally authorized to even $500,000, if you all decide that's something you're interested in, we would need to make up $280,000. I've gone through our ARPA-funded projects from capital in fiscal '23 and fiscal '24, and without affecting the $330,000 that we've promised capital is available for appropriation, we can come up with the $280,000. CAP presented this request to capital at their last meeting because if there was no appetite from capital and there was no appetite from the select board, then we would cut our losses and drop the project. Capital expressed an interest in moving forward, I think up to $600,000 for the project. So what I'm looking for tonight is input from this board. Beyond the $220, is it something that you're still interested in? Certainly $600,000, if that's the cap from capital, could be the cap from this board. What we'll do then is formalize the value engineering in the bid docs, put the bid project back out to bid. Obviously, there's no risk. The town reserves the right to reject all of the bids and see what we get. There are one of the biggest challenges is that the pump that's going in is very heavy, and we have to find a way to get it from the parking lot about 800 or 900 feet into the woods and then lowered into the water. So there are some expenses with that, whether it's finding a way to lower it from the bridge that goes over Bridge Meadowbrook and then having to float it into place. That's expensive. There's additional tree clearing work if we do it from the ground. But we've looked at these options. I mean, I still think my recommendation is that we put the project back out to bid, and if we can get it at the $500,000 or $600,000 range, that we still do it. In the long term, it still makes the most sense. But obviously, since this board has ultimate authority over ARPA funds, I'm looking for feedback from the board tonight.
Okay, well, we happen to have the Chair of Capital Asset here, so I'll let Mr. Schneider go first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we did debate this quite a bit at our last meeting last week. And, we want to realize the savings for not buying the water. The thinking is, if you go over $600,000, the return on investment is so long that we have to wonder what other costs, if it starts to go out to 10 years and beyond, will we start to incur other costs? Will we have to replace that pump? Will there be other things that impact the total cost of that project? And so, we hemmed and hawed, was 500 the right number or 600 the right number? I think we're all comfortable up to 600, but no more than that. I think that's sort of where we came out. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else on that.
Yeah, I mean, this has been going on for a while, and I echo echo your frustrations that we went down this road, we thought we had something that was reasonable, we thought that we had contingency. It was in there as a no-brainer at, you know, the 250 essentially is what we were looking at. However, you know, when we got some of these things, I think that it raises a red flag. I think that the capital asset was comfortable at 500. We were sitting there saying, geez, if it came in between, you know, 500 and 600, would we not recommend it at that point? And that's where we said, yeah, we probably would. I think ultimately we would have to make that decision to sit there and say, you know what, does that really make sense? I agree with Colin in that I think we should put it out to bid. I'm hopeful that if we put it out to bid at an approval amount that's higher than what it was before, it could be that nobody wanted to touch it at 225 or 250, you know, whatever we had for the initial piece for that, and we might get some folks that would come up with a way to address some of these. So I don't think there's any risk in us putting it out to bid. I think that the other key contingency that we said with capital asset was that extra money has to come from projects that we already allocated funds to and won't be spent because, you know, we'd able to get the projects done for cheaper. It was not something where we wanted to cut in. We have a limited capital budget this year that we think is gonna be there. We're not talking about taking on any debt, and we wanna maintain that. So this did not impact any of the funding for this year. So, any other questions or comments?
Well, this has been going on a long time. I mean, I think one of the first years on the board, all of a sudden we saw the water bill at the elementary school was $20,000. And we're like, well, let's just dig a well. You know, we'll recover that. And then it was Charles George. And then we came up with this particular project, and we've been looking at this for 5 or 6 years. You know, now the water cost is over $50,000. So, you know, and it just keeps going up further and further. You know, making these big capital investments to save on OpEx for years down the road, I think is very important. We need to reduce our operational expenses, and, you know, well, this might sound like a big dollar amount. Every year after that, we're gonna probably say $50,000, $60,000 on an annual basis. And those are the types of investments we should be looking at. So, you know, as long as it comes within that time frame, I'm still comfortable with this, because this is something that this board has really delved into a lot, reducing the OpEx expenses. You know, the leaves, you know, having Republic pick those up, it's another $50,000 every single year, and this could be another $50,000 or $60,000. Combine those two, it's over $100,000 a year we're saving on OpEx. We don't even have to think about it anymore. So I think it's worthwhile, but I would agree, I don't really want to see it go over 500. If it does, then that might be it. But I agree with going forward, putting out to bid.
I mean, I don't ever have problems with it going out to bid, but I am having a hard time wrapping my mind around the fact that we're spending potentially up to $600,000 to save 50. And I understand that it's a long-term project, I really, really do, right? But let's say it's $600,000 we're spending for $50,000 a year savings, right? Which may go up, which I understand that, right? That's still about 12 years to break even, and that's if nothing goes wrong. If the pump lasts us, we don't have to replace parts, we don't hit a tree dragging it from God knows where, right? And then we have to clear the trees, and we have to figure out a path to make this go well, right? So I think it's never a bad idea to put it out to bid, but that is concerning to me, right? Do we know, I don't know, does anybody here know how long these pumps are supposed to last without replacing parts or anything?
I'm told 20 years, if we maintain it correctly.
20 years if we maintain it correctly, okay.
And that's not
Is
the,
there a cost to maintaining it?
I would say nominal.
Okay.
Now the highway department.
and all the costs are not associated with the pump.
That's a
So,
good point.
A lot of there's work that needs to be done to get, the pump can be replaced, and it's not gonna be another $500,000.
Two of the big cost drivers are running the conduit. that was one of the first areas that we looked, because it's gonna run, we have to run conduit from the elementary school across the entire parking lot and then about 900 feet into the woods. One of the things we originally looked at was if we could, instead of digging a trench, which has a lot of expense, run overhead wires. The problem is we already have to dig the trench for the water line anyway. That can't be above ground. So we weren't gonna experience any cost savings. The other expense is the, I guess I'd call it like electrical box device that's gonna be out in the woods on the edge of the water, which certainly would have a much longer life expectancy. That's simply required because we need to get the electricity to it.
So that's good to know. So in the future, right, after we pay this initial shock of a sticker price, right, if we have to replace the pump or do maintenance or do things like that, we're not looking at something this big, not
No.
even close. Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better about it. I still have concerns, but that definitely makes me feel a little bit better.
And if the board is, if it would make the board more comfortable, I can put this back out to bid and commit that before I award the contract, I'll bring it back to a select board meeting like we used to do and have you award the contract formally.
Yeah, we would need to do that either way,
Yeah.
I think. Just because it's ARPA, I want to make sure, because we were still working through making sure that we got the balances and making sure that we were clear on that. So I would like to have it come back to us. I do think, one other thing relative to the water, the cost for drinking water is not going down. It will go up. I also think that we need to be aware that environmentally, using potable or drinking water for irrigating our fields is not very environmentally conscious, and I think that, you know, we need to look at those types of things to leverage our natural resources a little bit better. So that was also part of the thinking that we had.
Mr. Chair, one other question. So if the town is gonna take on some portion of the maintenance, i.e. pulling that pump out of the water, I'd like to get a sense of how difficult that process is. I know you were talking about, you know, running that thing 800 feet from parking lot to brook or whatever. How involved is the process of pulling that out and putting that in every year? Do you have to bring a crane in? Do we have to, you know, is it?
No, my understanding is we'd be able to, we have one and the schools have one as well, so whoever can do it. We have a small bobcat that we would attach a chain to the bucket of, and we'd be able to pull it out. They have plenty of room in their electrical, they call it a closet, but it's really like a warehouse at the elementary school to store it during the winter. And so part of me, you know, agreeing to these value engineerings, I went out there with Jimmy, I went out there with Dominic, we looked at the site, and so I have no concerns that our staff would be able to remove, because we wouldn't have to remove all the elements, like there's gonna
Yeah.
be a concrete box that is keeping it in place, that can stay, it's just the pump we'll have to take out.
Okay, thank you.
So it sounds like, and I guess the question is, do you have a motion prepared for this? I think the question is, what do you need from us? And then, it sounds like what we want is, it goes out to bid, but comes back to us so we understand exactly what the costs are gonna be, how it's gonna work, what the ongoing maintenance costs are gonna be before we do any final approval.
I don't need anything from you tonight.
Okay, I just
You
wanna
gave me
make-
the direction I needed, you'll have a formal opportunity to approve it when the bids come in.
All right, excellent. Great. Next item, review approve amendment number 1, DPW MOU with Sewer Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a quick one. As you'll remember, in November, you authorized the memorandum of understanding with the Sewer Commission regarding the DPW building and their contribution of funding toward it. In that agreement, it included timelines for design milestones. We hadn't even entered into an agreement with a designer at that point, so those milestones were not achievable. In the interest of keeping all parties on the same page, I attended a Sewer Commission meeting 3 weeks ago and gave them an update on the status. Bids are due on Wednesday for a design firm, and so using that, we worked backwards on when the timelines were realistic. So including your packet is a amendment. All that changes in the amendment is just the dates, so now we would have the first draft design to the Sewer Commission for them to review on March 8th. The rest stayed the same because it was just built off of a number of days after that. They approved it at their meeting this past Thursday, and so I just need the board to approve the MOU and authorize the chair to sign it.
Questions, comments, any concerns? Then I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board approve Amendment 1 to the MOU as presented and authorize the chair to execute the amendment.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, that carries 4-0-0. All right. Select board reports. Start with Mr. Schneider.
Thank you. So as we had mentioned earlier in this meeting, this past weekend, we did a walkthrough of the new middle school building. And I will say that even in its current state of just being a shell, it is so impressive what the possibilities are with that building and with that courtyard area. I think the town will be extremely pleased when they see the final product. The other thing that occurred to me is the amount of logistics to make sure that everything, every screw nail shows up on time, that, you know, the contractors are showing up on time. The amount of work that's involved in doing that is truly impressive. So I walked away very impressed. I think everyone else who was on the tour was equally impressed. I think the town is really getting a bang for its buck.
Thank you. Mr. Cohen.
Nothing tonight?
I have nothing this evening.
I was at the walkthrough. I was equally impressed. I was disappointed I didn't get to keep the hard hat. But I think that the schedule looks good also for the school. I think that I think people are going to be happy. That's it. We're going to go into executive session, so I will entertain a motion.
I move that the select board enter into executive session pursuant to exemption 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. DWSD system development fee and road impact fee. Exemption 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares all collective bargaining units. And exemption 2 to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, all non-union positions.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Roll call vote. Mr. Schneider.
In favor?
Mr. Cohen.
In favor.
In favor.
I am also in favor. That carries 4-0-0. That's the open portion of our meeting. Thanks, everybody. Hope you all have a good night.
Have a good night, everybody.
Ew.